There's a fundamental misunderstanding that keeps so many of us caught in endless seeking. We carry the belief that we must arrive somewhere, achieve something, or transform into someone other than who we already are. If those words struck you deeply, if you felt them land in your chest like an undeniable truth, then you are already exactly where you need to be. And I want you to know, I'm truly glad you're here. Whether you're listening in the quiet of your bed at 2 in the morning, during your lunch break, or while walking through your neighborhood, pause for a moment and share in the comments where in this beautiful world you're joining us from. Here's what I want you to do right now. Take hold of something cozy, a soft blanket perhaps. Maybe even dim the lights around you. Find a position where your body can truly settle in and let go. Because what we're about to explore together over the next 3 hours isn't merely a transfer of information. It is an experience of transformation. Together we'll uncover why this constant chase for a place beyond the present moment is the very thing that blinds us to the completeness that already surrounds us. And by the time we finish, you'll see why the ancient masters said that letting go is never about losing anything. It's about finally receiving everything. This is not just another video you'll watch and forget by tomorrow. This is an invitation to remember something you have always known, but may have forgotten. It is a call to awaken a truth within yourself that will change the way you move through each and every day of your life. So, settle in now. Breathe deeply with me. Allow yourself to be fully here, and together, let us begin this journey home to yourself. Now let's talk about the sense of incompletion that follows us everywhere. For most of us, it lingers like a gentle fog. We've become so accustomed to that we no longer question it. We adapt to its presence and begin to believe that it is simply the natural atmosphere of being human. But this fog is none other than the sense of incompletion. It is that quiet, persistent feeling that something is missing, that somehow you are not quite enough as you are right now, and that life in its current form isn't fully adequate. Because of this, we convince ourselves that we must move forward, accomplish more, and become someone different in order to fill this gap. We set off on the journey of life, as if it were a straight road with a definite finish line, somewhere far ahead, a distant point where all the scattered pieces of the puzzle finally fall into place. Yet this illusion of a destination is precisely what keeps the cycle of incompletion alive. It whispers that now is never quite sufficient and that you are never quite enough. So we keep walking in this fog, looking ahead and believing that fulfillment lies just around the next corner. This, however, is the very trap that the Buddha recognized more than 2,500 years ago as the foundation of human suffering. It is the endless grasping for something beyond the present that blinds us to the wholeness already here. This is what the Buddha referred to as dukkha in his first noble truth. But dukkha is not limited to obvious pain, suffering, or dramatic hardship. It is about the very fog we've been describing. It is the subtle, underlying restlessness, the sense that something is always slightly out of place, always just beyond reach. Think for a moment about how this appears in your own life. You wake up in the morning, and before your feet even touch the floor, your mind is already racing. It begins cataloging everything that feels incomplete, what still needs to be done, what hasn't yet been achieved, what remains missing from your experience. You might sit quietly with a cup of coffee watching the sunlight stream through the window, and for a brief shimmering moment, everything feels whole, perfect, and complete. But almost immediately, the fog rolls back in. The mind resumes its familiar routine, comparing the moment you're in to some imagined better version of life. Thoughts arise. Once I have this, then I will feel peace. Once I become that, then I will be free. Once I achieve this goal, meet the right person, or reach this level of success, then I will finally be able to rest in contentment. And so, life turns into a cycle of postponing happiness, delaying peace, and pushing contentment into the future, waiting for some event to justify it. We live in a state of perpetual postponement, always convinced that the next achievement, the next milestone, will be the one to finally clear the fog. But here's the fascinating part, something you've likely noticed in your own experience. Every time you reach a new milestone, the target shifts, the finish line moves. That goal you worked toward for so long becomes just another step along the way, and before long, the mind invents yet another condition that must be fulfilled before you can truly feel whole. Let me give you a picture that may feel familiar. You finally get the promotion you've been striving for over the course of months. And yes, for a day or two, you feel genuinely satisfied. But almost imperceptibly, the fog begins to creep back in. Now the focus shifts to the next level, the next challenge, the next victory you must secure to prove your worth once again. Or perhaps you've seen this pattern in your relationships. You meet someone wonderful, and for a time the sense of incompletion seems to dissolve. But gradually, you notice yourself fixating on what's not perfect, on what could be better, or on what conversations must take place before you can feel truly safe and secure. The fog does not vanish, it merely finds new territory to occupy. There is an ancient Zen story that captures this perfectly. A wealthy merchant spent his entire life accumulating treasures, convinced that once he had enough, he would finally feel secure, whole, and complete. One day, he came across a poor monk sitting peacefully by the river, smiling with unshakable contentment. Puzzled, the merchant asked, "How can you be so happy when you have nothing?" The monk simply replied, "How can you be so miserable when you have everything?" In that moment, the merchant realized that his sense of incompletion had nothing to do with what he possessed. It was rooted in the way he was relating to life itself. This story reveals something profound, something the ancient masters deeply understood. The fog of incompletion is not created by what we lack in the external world. It arises from the belief itself, the conviction that something should be different from what it is in this very moment. To understand this more deeply, let's look at the many ways this fog quietly operates in our daily lives. It is incredibly sophisticated in how it manifests. Sometimes it disguises itself as ambition, the relentless drive to achieve more, to become more, to accumulate more. At other times it takes the form of comparison, where we measure ourselves against others and feel as though we are falling behind in some invisible, imaginary race. And sometimes the fog manifests in a way that is especially deceptive. It hides within our spiritual seeking. We can become so consumed with the pursuit of being more enlightened, more peaceful, or more evolved, that we overlook the simple peace that is already available right here, in this very breath. In this way, even our spiritual practices can turn into yet another project, another attempt to become someone other than who we already are. The Buddha himself understood this trap with profound clarity. For 6 years, he practiced extreme asceticism, pushing his body and mind through severe deprivation, convinced that if he just tried harder and denied himself more completely, he would break through into some higher state of realization. He pushed himself so far that he nearly starved to death, all in the hope of attaining enlightenment. But the truth revealed itself only when he stopped striving so intensely. Sitting quietly beneath the Bodhi tree, he allowed himself to simply be present with what was already here. It was then that he realized the essence of what he had been seeking through years of struggle had never truly been absent. It was only obscured by the desperate effort to find it. This is the paradox at the heart of all genuine spiritual understanding. What we are searching for, we already are. What we believe to be missing has never actually been lost. The fog of incompletion is like dreaming of thirst. while sitting beside a clear, flowing stream. The water has always been there, but in the dream we forget. And because we are so accustomed to this fog, we accept it as an unavoidable part of being human. We wake up in it, make choices from within it, and even plan our entire lives around the attempt to escape it. Yet rarely do we pause to question whether this persistent sense of not enough is actually true. The Buddha compared this sense of incompletion to a mirage in the desert. From a distance, the shimmering image of water looks utterly convincing. You can see it, imagine it, and long for the relief it seems to promise. But as you walk toward it, the vision always recedes. And even if you could arrive at the exact spot where the mirage appeared to be, you would find nothing but dry sand. Our seeking often follows the same pattern. We chase after experiences, relationships, achievements, or spiritual states, believing that they will finally provide the wholeness we are longing for. Yet, when we arrive at those milestones, we discover that the feeling of incompletion has not vanished. It has simply reinvented itself, finding new reasons to persist. Consider how this pattern unfolds. In the realm of material success, there is always another level of income that promises to bring true security, another possession that seems like it will finally deliver satisfaction, another experience that appears to prove you are living life to the fullest. The fog is endlessly creative, always finding new objects to attach your seeking to. Yet, it doesn't restrict itself to material things alone. The fog can just as easily settle into our emotional lives. It whispers, "If only I could feel more confident, then I'd finally be happy. If I could just overcome this anxiety, then I'd be free. If I could just find lasting inner peace, then my life would be complete." Do you see the pattern? It is always, if this, then that. It is always conditional, always dependent on some future state, some achievement, some moment other than now. The fog convinces us that our well-being is being held hostage by circumstances that must line up perfectly before we can finally rest. Now, this does not mean that growth, love, or accomplishment are meaningless. Far from it. It simply means that when we pursue them from a place of lack, from within the fog of incompletion, we remain one step behind the peace we are searching for. No matter how far we travel, peace always seems just out of reach. So let me ask you something that might sound unusual at first. What if nothing is actually missing? What if this deep assumption that something must be added to your life, your experience, or your very being is the source of the fog itself? The Zen tradition speaks directly to this. They teach that enlightenment is not about gaining something new. It is about recognizing what has already been present. It's like spending your entire life searching frantically for your glasses while they rest right on top of your head. The moment you finally realize where they are, you see that you were never lacking anything at all. There is another Zen story that captures this beautifully. A devoted student spent years traveling from one teacher to another, seeking the ultimate spiritual breakthrough. At last, exhausted and discouraged, he collapsed in despair beside a country road. An elderly woman happened to pass by and noticed his sadness. When he explained his long and fruitless search for enlightenment, she smiled kindly and said, "You poor man, you've been carrying your treasure with you all along, but you've been so busy looking for it elsewhere that you never realized it was already yours." This story points us toward an essential truth. Realization cannot be forced or manufactured. It arises naturally the moment we begin to see the fog for what it really is. Not the weather, but simply a way of perceiving. Think about the times in your own life when the fog has lifted on its own, even if just for a few fleeting minutes. Maybe you were lost in a conversation with someone you love, fully present with no sense of lack. Maybe you were walking through nature and suddenly felt at peace with everything, as it was. Maybe you were creating something with your hands, cooking a meal, or simply sitting quietly, when for no reason at all, completeness revealed itself. And in those moments, everything felt exactly as it should be. Think about it carefully. Were you truly lacking anything then, or were you simply present enough to notice the completeness that has always been here? The fog convinces us that such moments are exceptions, pleasant interludes in the otherwise serious business of striving to get somewhere. But what if they are not exceptions at all? What if they are glimpses of what life naturally feels like when we are not lost in the story of incompletion? What if those flashes of contentment are not rare states to be earned, but reflections of our actual nature waiting to be recognized? And what if the fog, not the clarity, is the exception? The Buddha's great insight was that suffering does not arise from what happens to us. It arises from the way we relate to what happens. The fog thickens the moment we believe this present moment should be different, that we should feel differently, that our lives should look differently, that reality should somehow match the mind's endless conditions. But when we allow ourselves to rest with what is, without layering constant commentary about what's missing or broken, something beautiful occurs. The fog begins to thin on its own, not because we fought against it or forced it away, but because we stopped feeding it with our resistance. There is a Zen story that illustrates this perfectly. A student once came to his master complaining about his meditation. "Master," he said, "my mind is restless and distracted. When will I finally achieve the peace I'm seeking?" The master lifted a glass of muddy water and asked the student to make it clear. Eager to prove himself, the student shook the glass vigorously, but this only made the water cloudier. The master then said softly, "Just let it sit." Together they watched in silence as the mud slowly settled and the water became perfectly clear. This is exactly how the fog of incompletion works. The more we struggle against it, the thicker it grows. But when we notice it without trying to fix, resist, or escape it, it begins to settle naturally. And in that settling, we rediscover something that has been here all along, a peace that is not dependent on circumstances, a completeness that does not hinge on what we have or have not achieved. In the ancient Buddhist texts, this is described as our original nature. It is the awareness that exists before any story about what is wrong or missing. Far from being an abstract or mystical concept, this awareness is as immediate and tangible as your own breath. It is the simple, spacious consciousness that notices the fog, the silent backdrop within which all experiences arise and fade. When we rest in this awareness, even for just a moment, we realize something profound. Awareness itself has never been incomplete. It has quietly witnessed all our seeking, all our striving, and every sensation of lack, yet it has remained untouched by them. It is like space, vast, open, and containing everything, yet never limited or defined by what it contains. Recognizing this does not mean becoming passive or abandoning growth, dreams, or aspirations. Rather, it means understanding that your worth, your peace, and your fundamental okayness do not depend on external circumstances or validation. They are already woven into the fabric of your being. When you truly know this, not just intellectually, but deep in your bones, you can still pursue your goals and dreams, but you do so from a completely different place. No longer are you driven by desperation or a sense of lack. Instead, your actions arise from joy, creativity, and natural expression. The ancient masters recognized this truth. When we live and act from the understanding that we are already whole, the world responds differently to us. We are no longer grasping, demanding, or trying to prove our worth. Rather, We are simply expressing the completeness that already exists within us. This shift in energy makes all the difference. When our actions flow from fullness instead of lack, the results in our lives transform in profound ways. And as we sit together in this moment, I invite you to experience this directly. For the next few breaths, let go of the story about what's missing from your life. Release the narrative that says you must become something or achieve something in order to finally be okay. Simply be here, breathing, aware, present. Can you feel it? That subtle shift that happens when you are no longer measuring this moment against an imagined, better version of reality. This is what it feels like when the fog begins to lift. This is the clear air that has always been here, quietly waiting beneath the clouds of striving and seeking. The truth is, you have never actually been incomplete. You have only been walking in a fog that made it seem that way, and the fog, no matter how thick it appears, can never touch the sun. It can only obscure it temporarily, never extinguish its light. As we continue this journey together, we'll explore what happens when we really begin to see this for ourselves. When we recognize that the finish line has always been moving precisely because we've been chasing it, we begin to understand a profound truth. Life transforms when we stop running toward tomorrow and start living from the wholeness available right here, right now. Now let's look more closely at what happens when every achievement becomes just another step. There is something almost magical about the way the human mind works with goals and accomplishment. We set our sights on something, a promotion, a relationship, a financial milestone, a personal breakthrough, and then we pour our energy into attaining it. Along the way, we tell ourselves, once I have this, then I will finally feel peace. Once I achieve that, then I will truly be happy. Once I reach this level, then I can finally rest in contentment. But here is the beautiful, mysterious, and sometimes deeply frustrating truth about being human. Every time we arrive at a new milestone, the mind shifts the target. The finish line moves. What once felt like the ultimate goal soon becomes nothing more than another step on an endless staircase. Suddenly, there is something else we must accomplish before we can finally feel complete. It is as though we are running a race where the finish line itself has legs, forever staying just a few strides ahead, no matter how fast we run. And so, life turns into a cycle of postponing happiness, deferring peace, and delaying contentment until some future event arrives to justify it. The Buddha, in his profound understanding of human nature, described what he called the second noble truth, that the root of suffering lies in attachment, tanha, in Sanskrit. But tanha is not only about being attached to physical objects. It is more subtle and pervasive than that. It is the attachment to the idea that our well-being depends on external circumstances, that we cannot be truly at ease until something outside of us changes or improves. This belief shows up in countless ordinary, relatable ways. Perhaps you can recall when you were younger, imagining that getting your driver's license would finally bring you freedom and independence. And for a moment, when you first held those keys, you probably did feel exactly that way. Yet almost without noticing, the focus shifted. Soon, it was about having your own car, then a better car, and eventually perhaps even a house to park it in. The same pattern often unfolds in our careers. There may have been a time when achieving a particular position felt like it would resolve everything. You pictured how confident you would feel, how secure, how respected, and when you finally reached that goal, there may have been a brief wave of satisfaction. But soon, the mind began its familiar dance, moving on to the next level, the next challenge, the next achievement that might prove your worth once and for all. This cycle is not evidence of personal failure, nor is it a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is simply the natural pattern of the mind. When it believes contentment is conditioned, the mind becomes like a sophisticated search engine, endlessly scanning for what is missing, what needs to be fixed, what gap still needs to be filled. There is an ancient Zen story that illustrates this beautifully. A successful businessman spent years working tirelessly to build his company. He promised himself that once he reached a certain level of success, he would finally relax and enjoy life. When that day came, he felt satisfied, though only for 3 days. By the 4th day, he found himself lying awake at night, worrying about competitors and strategizing for the next expansion. Confused and frustrated, he went to see a Zen master. "Master," he said, "I have achieved everything I thought I wanted, but I am still not at peace. What's wrong with me?" The master smiled and pointed to a cat in the garden, endlessly chasing its own tail. "Tell me," the master asked, "when do you think that cat will catch what it's chasing?" The businessman watched in silence, and then realization dawned. As long as he was chasing happiness, it would remain just beyond his reach. This cycle of conditional contentment is not limited to careers or material success. It operates in remarkably subtle and sophisticated ways in nearly every area of our lives. In relationships, we may believe that once we find the right partner, then we will finally feel whole. And in the early days, when the relationship is new, this belief often seems to come true. Yet, as time passes, the mind inevitably begins to notice imperfection. Suddenly there are conversations that must be had, changes that need to be made, conditions that must be met before the relationship can feel truly satisfying. The same holds true with health and fitness. We set a goal weight or a performance milestone, imagining that once we reach it, we will finally feel confident, attractive, and secure in our own skin. And yet, even when those goals are achieved, the mind quickly recalibrates, pointing to the next thing that must be improved before true contentment can be allowed. But even when we achieve the health or fitness milestone we were aiming for, something else quickly arises that demands our attention, a different part of the body to tone, a new health metric to optimize, another standard of vitality to reach. The same pattern plays out in our spiritual lives. We might seek a particular experience or state of consciousness, believing that once we achieve it, then we will finally feel peaceful and enlightened. And yet even profound spiritual experiences can become just another step on an endless ladder of seeking. The mind whispers, "I had that awakening, but now I need to sustain it. I found some peace, but I need deeper peace. I felt connected, but I need to feel more connected." Do you see the pattern? It is not that the achievements themselves are meaningless, nor that wanting or striving is wrong. The problem arises when we make our peace conditional upon getting them. In doing so, we enter into a contract with life that can never truly be fulfilled. The Buddha understood this with striking clarity. He saw that tanha, this craving for things to be different, is like trying to quench thirst with salt water. The more we drink, the thirstier we become. Each achievement may momentarily satisfy the craving, but it also strengthens the belief that real satisfaction depends on something external, just out of reach. Let me paint a picture of how this cycle might unfold in a single ordinary day. You wake up, and the first thing you do is check your phone, unconsciously seeking some piece of information, some connection, some validation that will make the day feel more complete. At breakfast, your mind is already racing ahead, planning what needs to be accomplished in order for the day to feel worthwhile. At work, your attention narrows to the tasks that promise to bring you closer to the next goal, the next milestone, the next piece of proof that you are making progress. Even in moments of genuine pleasure or connection, there is often a subtle undercurrent. "This is nice, But what's next? This feels good, but how can I make it last? This is beautiful, but how do I create more experiences like this? The mind becomes so skillful at perpetuating this cycle that it can even turn presence itself into a goal. Thoughts creep in like, I need to be more mindful. I should meditate more consistently. I want to be more grateful. Even our longing for peace becomes just another item on the endless to-do list of becoming. What began as a genuine desire for clarity subtly transforms into another form of striving. There is a Zen story that beautifully illustrates this truth. A monk had spent years in meditation, relentlessly seeking deeper states of concentration and insight. One day, his master found him sitting in perfect stillness and asked, "What are you doing?" The monk, full of pride in his dedication, replied, "I'm practicing to become a Buddha." The master picked up a tile and began rubbing it with a cloth. The puzzled monk asked, "What are you doing, master?" The master answered, "I'm polishing this tile to make it into a mirror." The monk objected, "But master, no amount of polishing can turn a tile into a mirror." The master smiled and replied, "And no amount of sitting can turn you into what you already are." This story points to something profoundly liberating about the nature of conditional happiness. When we believe that we must achieve, accomplish, or become something in order to be okay, we are like the monk trying to polish a tile into a mirror. We are attempting to manufacture through effort what is already present by nature. The peace, the wholeness, the completeness we are seeking cannot be created. They can only be recognized. Yet, let's be honest about how difficult this realization can be. Everything around us seems designed to reinforce the opposite message. Our culture, our education systems, our economic structures, our social media feeds, all of them endlessly proclaim the same idea: you are not enough as you are, but if you buy this, achieve that, or become something more, then you will finally be fulfilled. The message is loud, constant, and persuasive. And it doesn't only come from outside of us. Often this pattern begins very early in our lives, long before we realize how deeply it shapes our sense of worth and our pursuit of happiness. Well-meaning parents and teachers often taught us to find our worth in our accomplishments. We heard messages like, "I'm proud of you when you get good grades," or "You're such a good child when you behave," or "You'll be successful if you work hard." Over time, love and approval became conditional upon performance. Without realizing it, we internalized this as the way life works. We came to believe that our value rests on what we achieve, how we behave, and how well we meet external expectations. So, when we find ourselves caught in the cycle of moving finish lines, it's important to approach this realization with compassion. This pattern is natural and understandable. We are not failing at life, nor are we broken or flawed. We are simply operating under a learned belief about where happiness comes from. Recognizing this removes the shame and blame and allows us to see that what we thought was a personal failing is in fact a universal misunderstanding. The Buddhist teaching of tanha helps us see this clearly. Craving is not a moral weakness or evidence that something is wrong with us. It is simply a misunderstanding about the nature of satisfaction. We keep looking for permanence in experiences that are, by their very nature, temporary. We keep trying to build a foundation of contentment on shifting sands, on circumstances that are always changing. And so stability never lasts. But here's where the teaching becomes profoundly liberating. The Buddha never said that craving was evil or that desire should be eliminated altogether. He pointed instead to the importance of understanding its nature. When we see how this pattern operates, When we witness it with awareness rather than being unconsciously driven by it, something begins to shift. The grip loosens and freedom becomes possible. Imagine for a moment what it would feel like to pursue your goals and dreams without the desperate edge of, I need this in order to be okay. What would it be like to work towards something meaningful while simultaneously knowing that your fundamental well-being does not depend on achieving it? This subtle but radical shift changes everything. And it's important to be clear, this isn't about passivity or abandoning growth and accomplishment. It's about recognizing the difference between natural expansion and desperate seeking. When a flower grows toward the sun, it's not because it believes it is inadequate as it is. It grows because growth is its nature. Expansion and expression are inherent to life itself. In the same way, our movement toward dreams and goals can arise not from lack, but from fullness. There is a profound difference between creating from joy and creating from lack. When our actions emerge from the knowing that we are already complete, they become an expression of wholeness rather than an attempt to achieve it. The energy behind them is entirely different. The results that unfold are different, but most importantly, our lived experience of the process itself becomes profoundly different. The trap of conditional contentment is that it turns life into a perpetual delay. We keep postponing joy, postponing peace, postponing rest, until some imagined future moment when everything finally aligns. Yet life is not waiting for us. It is happening now. Joy is available now. Peace is accessible now. Not because circumstances are flawless, but because the capacity for these experiences exists, independent of circumstances. So let me ask you to reflect on something. Think of a moment in your life when you felt genuinely content, truly at peace, completely satisfied with what was happening. It may have been a quiet walk in nature, a deep conversation with a friend, a creative flow where you lost track of time, or even a simple morning when everything felt perfectly in place. In that moment, did anything need to change? Or was it enough simply to be there, present with what was? Were you lacking anything in those moments? Or were you simply present enough to notice the fullness that was already there? Were you happy because you had finally achieved something? Or were you happy because, for a while, you had stopped needing to achieve anything at all? These moments serve as clues, brief, luminous glimpses of what life feels like when we are not caught in the cycle of conditional happiness. They reveal that contentment is not something we manufacture through effort. It's something we uncover by removing the obstacles we've placed in front of it. The Buddha's insight about attachment does not ask us to abandon preferences or stop setting goals. Rather, it invites us to hold our preferences lightly, to pursue our goals with joy, and to engage with life fully, while knowing that our deepest fulfillment does not hinge on any single outcome. This is one of the most practical teachings in all of Buddhism, when we understand that the finish line keeps moving precisely because we are chasing it. We can choose to run a different kind of race. We can approach life's adventures and challenges from a place of playfulness instead of desperation, from curiosity rather than craving, from honest expression rather than anxious seeking. And here's the beautiful paradox. When we stop making our peace conditional on external achievements, our capacity for real achievement often increases. Freed from the tight grip of fear and the frantic need to prove ourselves, we act with greater clarity, more creativity, and a truer, more authentic power. As we continue this journey together, we will explore what happens when we stop chasing the moving finish line and begin to discover the completeness that has been present all along. We'll learn what it means to live from fullness rather than lack, from presence rather than perpetual seeking, from the joy of what is rather than the hope of what might be. But for now, simply notice. Notice when your mind invents the next finish line, the next condition for happiness. Notice it with gentleness and curiosity, without judgment. In that gentle noticing, you will taste the freedom that comes from seeing the pattern clearly. Because the moment you see it, you are no longer unconsciously trapped by it. The finish line will continue to move as long as we believe our peace depends on reaching it. But when we discover that peace was never waiting ahead of us, that it has always been within us, the whole game changes. We stop running toward a distant goal and begin walking peacefully and joyfully in the direction our heart wants to go. The beautiful story of what we already are. There's a story I want to share with you. At first, it may sound simple, but within it lies one of the most profound truths about human existence. It is the story of a wave in the ocean that spends its entire existence trying desperately to become water. Picture this wave for a moment. It moves with tremendous urgency across the vast ocean, convinced that somewhere ahead, through some perfect effort, in some perfect moment, it will finally achieve its deepest longing. It rises with great ambition, crashes with dramatic intensity, and breaks with passionate determination, trying so hard, so very hard, to become what it believes it lacks. The wave looks around and sees other waves that appear more graceful, more powerful, more beautiful. If only I could be like that wave, it thinks. If only I could rise higher, crash more magnificently, create more impressive displays of foam and spray. And so it pushes itself harder, becomes more urgent in its movements, and grows more desperate in its efforts. But here's what the wave doesn't realize. What it has never once realized in all its urgent striving is that it has always been water from the very beginning. Every molecule of its being, every drop of its essence, every particle of its existence has always been exactly what it was struggling so desperately to become. This is the beautiful, tragic, and ultimately liberating story of most human lives. We are the waves who have forgotten that we are water. We spend our days moving with urgency, rising with ambition, crashing with frustration, and breaking with disappointment, all in pursuit of something we have never actually been without. In the Zen tradition, there is a teaching that speaks directly to this profound misunderstanding. It is the doctrine of Buddha nature, the recognition that you are already enlightened, though you may not yet know it. Not enlightened as some future achievement, not enlightened as something you must earn or deserve, but enlightened as your very nature, as what you most fundamentally already are. But let's explore what this really means in the texture of daily life. Because this is not just a beautiful metaphor or an abstract spiritual concept. It is about recognizing something so immediate, so present, and so intimately yours that you may have been overlooking it your entire life. Think about the moment when you first wake up in the morning, before your feet touch the floor, before you check your phone, before you begin the familiar inventory of what needs to be done or what hasn't been accomplished yet. In that space, there is a moment of pure awareness, a consciousnness that simply knows it exists, that simply recognizes it is awake, that is present to the sheer fact of being alive. In that brief pause before the wave begins its urgent movement across the ocean of the day, you are like still water, complete, whole, and lacking nothing. But then, almost immediately, the familiar patterns return. The wave begins to move once again, seeking, striving, and trying to become something other than what it naturally is. There is an ancient Zen story about a master who was approached by a student seeking enlightenment. The student said, "Master, I have been practicing for years, but I still haven't achieved awakening. What must I do?" The master looked at him kindly and asked, "Who is it that wants to achieve awakening?" The student was confused. "I do, of course," he replied. The master continued, "And who is this I that seeks? Who is aware of the seeking? Who knows that enlightenment is desired?" As the student sat with these questions, something began to dawn on him, the very awareness that knew about seeking, the awareness that was conscious of the desire for enlightenment, the awareness that was present through all his spiritual efforts, had never been unenlightened. It was there before he began seeking, it was present during all his seeking, and it would remain whether or not he ever found what he was looking for. Like the wave suddenly realizing that it had always been water, the student recognized that he had always been what he was seeking. But let us bring this understanding down to earth, into the ordinary moments where we actually live our lives. Consider how often you find yourself thinking, I need to be more confident. But who is it that recognizes the lack of confidence? Who is aware enough to notice that confidence seems absent? The very awareness that observes the feeling of uncertainty is itself utterly certain of its own existence. It is like water noticing it feels dry while remaining completely and inseparably wet. Or perhaps you often think, I need to find inner peace. But pause and consider this carefully. What is it that is aware of the absence of peace? What is it that notices agitation, restlessness, and the seeking for something calmer? The awareness that observes turbulence is itself perfectly still, like the deep ocean that remains unmoved and undisturbed, even when waves crash violently on its surface. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught about Buddha nature. It does not mean you must become enlightened. It means that the very capacity for enlightenment, the awareness, the consciousness, the presence that you are, has never been damaged, diminished, or corrupted by any experience you have ever had. It is like space itself, vast, boundless, containing all things, yet never limited or altered by what it holds. The wave analogy becomes even more beautiful when we reflect on how it plays out in our relationships with others. So often, we look at people around us and think, they have something I lack. If only I could be as calm as that person. If only I had their confidence, their success, their apparent peace. In doing so, we become waves comparing ourselves to other waves, never realizing that we are all expressions of the same vast ocean. In Zen Buddhism, there is a profound recognition that separation is an illusion. When a wave truly realizes its nature as water, it simultaneously recognizes that every other wave is also water. The boundaries we perceive between self and other, between my consciousness and your consciousness, between my experience and your experience, are like the apparent boundaries between waves. They exist on the surface, but not in the depth. And this is where the teaching becomes practically transformative in daily life. When you begin to recognize your own wave nature, when you start to see that what you are seeking is already what you are, the entire quality of your seeking changes. You are no longer a desperate wave crashing wildly towards some distant shore. Instead, you become a wave that recognizes its own nature, a wave that knows it is made of water, and therefore moves through the ocean with complete freedom. This shift in understanding does not mean that you suddenly stop having preferences, ambitions, or dreams. Rather, it means that you approach them from an entirely different place. A wave that knows its water never ceases to move, but its movement carries a different quality. It flows with grace rather than desperation, with joy rather than urgency, and with curiosity rather than craving. To illustrate this more clearly, let me share a story. There was once a woman who devoted years of her life to searching for the perfect teacher, the perfect practice, and the perfect experience that might finally bring her the spiritual fulfillment she longed for. Her journey took her to distant monasteries, where she lived among monks and nuns, studying ancient scriptures with the hope of uncovering hidden truths. She practiced difficult and complicated techniques, pushed her body and mind through intense disciplines, and carried with her a constant sense that she was always just one step away from the great breakthrough she believed she needed. No matter what she tried, the feeling of arriving never came. One evening, Drained from her endless searching, she sat alone by a quiet riverbank. Overwhelmed with weariness, she began to cry. "I've tried everything," she whispered to herself, her voice breaking under the weight of her despair. "I've done all that I know how to do, yet I still don't feel enlightened. What is wrong with me?" As her tears fell into the flowing water, something shifted. In the stillness of her exhaustion, she noticed something subtle but profound. She realized that she was aware of her sadness. She was aware of her frustration. She was even aware of her endless seeking. Then a deeper question arose in her mind. What was this awareness itself? In that single moment, clarity dawned. She saw that the seeker and the sought were not two separate things. The wave of her searching and the water of what she longed for had never been apart. The very consciousness that noticed her feelings of being unenlightened was in itself the enlightenment she had been seeking all along. It was as though she had suddenly realized that she had been wearing her glasses the entire time while searching frantically for them. With this recognition, she understood that she had always been what she was looking for, and her restless quest dissolved into a simple knowing. This realization, this shift from becoming to being, is not limited to that woman's story. It is available in any moment, even now. As you read and hear these words, there is an awareness present. It is the awareness that notices the act of listening, that grasps meaning, that perceives the rhythm of sound and silence, and that quietly observes all of it. This awareness is not something you possess, like an object or a tool. It is what you are at the most fundamental level, and it has never, not for a single instant, been incomplete, inadequate, or in need of fixing. Yet the mind, remarkable as it is, creative, imaginative, and sometimes troublesome, often forgets this truth. Like a wave that has forgotten it, is water. The mind constructs elaborate stories about what needs to be repaired, achieved, or transcended. It invents complex narratives about spiritual progress, personal growth, and endless self-improvement. But while these stories swirl and shift, the awareness within which they arise remains unchanged, perfectly still, perfectly whole, and perfectly present. This is the same truth pointed to in the Buddhist teaching of emptiness, or sunyata. It approaches the recognition from a slightly different angle. When we look deeply into the nature of any wave, we discover that there is no solid, separate, or independent entity to be found. What appears as a distinct wave is nothing other than water, briefly taking on a particular form before dissolving back into the ocean. The wave is never apart from the ocean. It is always the ocean itself, in movement, born from the same source and inseparable from its essence. In the same way, when we look deeply into the sense of being a separate self, endlessly seeking fulfillment, we discover that there is no solid or independent seeker to be found. What we uncover instead is only consciousness, briefly taking the form of thoughts, emotions, and experiences, yet never existing apart from the awareness that gives rise to them and sustains them. Just as the wave is not different from water, the self is not different from consciousness. This simple yet profound realization changes the way we relate to every part of our lives. When difficult emotions surface, fear, sadness, anger, or confusion, we no longer need to view them as problems to be solved or obstacles to be transcended. Instead, we can see them as waves rising within the vast ocean of our being. They appear, move through us, and eventually fade, but none of them ever touch the still, silent depth of awareness that quietly observes them. Likewise, when pleasurable experiences arise, joy, love, peace, or excitement, we no longer have to cling to them desperately or fear their eventual disappearance. We can enjoy them as beautiful expressions of our wave nature, while knowing that our deepest wholeness is not dependent on their presence. Whether the ocean is turbulent or calm, it remains the ocean. In the same way, Whether our experiences are painful or blissful, we remain the awareness within which all experiences come and go. There is a Zen poem that conveys this truth with remarkable clarity. The pine teaches silence, the rock teaches stillness, the lake teaches reflection. But who is the teacher when all teachers are absent? The answer, of course, is awareness itself, the consciousness that receives the teachings of the pine, the rock, and the lake, yet requires none of them in order to be whole. It is the awareness that is present to every lesson, yet already complete without needing any teaching at all. This is why so many spiritual traditions describe awakening not as an achievement, but as a kind of remembering. You are not striving toward becoming enlightened. You are remembering that enlightenment has always been your natural state. You are not trying to create or develop consciousness. You are recognizing the consciousness that has always been here. You are not searching for your true nature. You are simply seeing through the illusion that you ever lost it in the first place. Of course, we must be honest about how difficult it can be to live from this recognition in the midst of daily life. Even when we clearly glimpse our water nature, the old patterns of wave thinking quickly reassert themselves. We catch sight of our completeness, and immediately the mind wants to grasp it, preserve it, improve it, or share it with others. Without realizing it, we turn even the recognition of our Buddha nature into yet another form of seeking. This is why the great Zen master, Huangpo, reminded his students, "Your everyday mind, that is the way." He was not speaking about entering some rare, elevated state, nor about holding on to any particular experience. He was pointing instead to the ordinary awareness that is always here, the simple clarity that is present as you read these words, as you make sense of their meaning, as you sit in this very moment. This awareness is not something extraordinary that needs to be cultivated. It is so ordinary, so immediate, and so intimately present that we often miss it, overlooking its simplicity as we chase after something more dramatic. The shift from becoming to being is subtle, yet it carries a power that transforms everything. Rather than asking ourselves, "How can I become more peaceful?" we begin to wonder, what is the awareness that notices the absence of peace? Instead of striving to cultivate more love, we ask, what is it that recognizes love when it appears and also notices when it is absent? And rather than trying endlessly to transcend our perceived limitations, we turn inward and inquire who or what is aware of these so-called limitations. These questions do not point us toward conventional answers. Instead, they open a doorway into recognition, into remembering, into a sudden and undeniable seeing of what has always been here. It is like the moment when a wave suddenly realizes it has always been water. We recognize that what we were chasing through years of spiritual practice, personal development, and efforts at self-improvement was never something outside of us. It has always been the awareness in which all these movements of growth and striving of in the first place. This realization does not render practice or self-improvement meaningless. The waves of life will always move across the ocean, but the quality of that movement changes when the wave knows it is water. It still flows, sometimes gracefully, sometimes clumsily, sometimes with beauty, and sometimes destructively. Yet now the movement arises not from desperation, but from play, not from seeking, but from expression, not from a hunger to become something else, but from the joy of being exactly what it already is. As we continue on this journey together, we will explore what it truly means to live from this recognition, to move through life, not as a limited self-chasing consciousness, but as consciousness itself, expressing in countless forms. We will see what happens when the wave no longer tries to become water, and instead begins to delight in its dance across the ocean of existence. But for now, let us pause in the simplicity of this recognition. You are the awareness in which every experience appears. You are the consciousness that knows your moments of joy and your moments of sorrow, your states of clarity and your states of confusion, your searching and your moments of finding. This awareness has never been touched by pain, never been diminished by failure, never been heightened by success. Like water itself, it simply is what it is, taking on infinite forms without ever departing from its true essence. You are already what you seek. You have always been what you seek. The wave has never been anything other than water, and you have never been anything other than the consciousness in which all of life unfolds. This is not a belief to adopt, nor a concept to cling to. It is a recognition awaiting its own dawning. When it arrives, it feels as natural and inevitable as the rising sun casting its light over the ocean, illuminating the endless dance of waves that have never, for even a single moment, been separate from the water that is their source, their substance, and their ultimate destination. When life becomes flow instead of formula, here is something that may shift the way you see everything unfolding in your life right now. Reality is not as rigid as we often imagine. It is not a fixed equation waiting to be solved. It is not a precise formula where inserting the right variables guarantees the perfect outcome. Reality is far more fluid, more alive, more responsive, more mysterious than any formula could capture. Reality is far more like music than mathematics. Fluid, expressive, alive, and constantly unfolding. And just as with music, the value of life is not found in reaching a final conclusion or arriving at a particular point. Its beauty and its meaning are discovered in the rhythm, the unfolding, the presence of each moment. A symphony does not exist for its last note, and a jazz improvisation does not hold all its brilliance in the closing chord. The essence of music is alive in every note as it emerges, in every pause, in every unexpected turn. In the same way, the meaning and vitality of life are not postponed until some distant arrival point. They are here, contained within the expression of each passing moment. When this understanding begins to settle in us, it transforms the way we meet our daily experience. Instead of approaching life as though it were a problem to be solved or a puzzle waiting for the right solution, we can begin to move through it as though it were a song to be danced with. Instead of demanding that every moment justify its existence by leading somewhere significant, we can allow each moment to stand complete in itself, like a single note that holds its own perfect fullness without reference to what comes before or after. Consider a river for a moment. It is never the same from one instant to the next. The water that flows past your feet in this moment will never return. Each drop is unique, each flow unrepeatable, each moment of movement unprecedented. Yet when we stand before a river, we do not grieve for the water that has passed, nor do we strain anxiously for the water that has yet to come. We appreciate the river as it is, a continuous movement, a living process, an ever-changing expression of flow. The ancient masters understood life itself in exactly this way, not as a static collection of objects and outcomes, but as a continuous becoming, a living improvisation, a symphony playing itself in the key of existence. When we begin to live in alignment with this truth, something extraordinary takes place. We stop clinging so tightly to the moments we love, wishing desperately that they would last forever. We stop being devastated when joy fades, and we stop fighting so fiercely to escape the moments that are difficult or painful. We begin to understand that the very nature of every experience is to arise, to express itself completely, and then to dissolve back into the silence from which it came. Like the notes of a symphony, like the waves upon the ocean, like each breath we take, life is an endless rhythm of appearing and disappearing. Let me share a story that illuminates this insight, beautifully. Once there was a master musician invited to perform before a king. The king, who knew little about music, grew impatient during the performance. "Why do you keep changing the melody?" he demanded. "Why can't you simply play the beautiful part again and again?" The musician smiled softly and replied, "Your Majesty, if I were to play only one note, no matter how beautiful it may be, it would cease to be music. Music lives in the movement between notes, in the silence that gives shape to sound, in the seamless flow that connects beginning, middle, and end." As the musician spoke, the king began to listen with fresh ears. Slowly he understood that beauty was never in a single note or isolated moment. It was in the way every note, every pause, and every shift wove together into something greater than the sum of its parts. And this is exactly how life unfolds. Once we begin to see its musical nature, we stop trying to trap the beautiful moments in amber, hoping they will last forever. We stop trying to fast forward through the difficult passages to reach the parts we prefer. Instead, we learn to appreciate the entire composition. We notice how joy gives meaning to sorrow, how rest gives meaning to activity, and how silence gives meaning to sound. The Buddhist teaching on impermanence sheds deep light on the true root of our suffering. We do not suffer because life changes. We suffer because we resist its changing. We expect life to function like mathematics, yielding predictable and consistent results if we only arrange the right variables. Then, when the music of existence naturally shifts into a new movement, we feel betrayed. Imagine holding on to one note in a symphony, refusing to let the music move forward. You would lose the beauty of the piece entirely. Or imagine trying to dam a river so that you could keep your favorite water forever in place. You would destroy the very flow that makes the river alive. This is precisely what happens when we try to make permanent what is inherently impermanent. We grasp desperately at good times, trying to stretch them out indefinitely. We resist painful times, refusing to let them play their role in our unfolding story. We demand that people, circumstances, and even our own inner states remain constant, predictable, and unchanging. In doing so, we are asking music to behave like mathematics, and then we wonder why life feels so heavy, stressful, and unsatisfying. But there is another way to move through the world, a way that honors the musical nature of existence rather than fighting against it. The Taoists called it Wu Wei, which means effortless action or non-forcing. It is the art of flowing with life's rhythm instead of struggling against it, of dancing with change instead of wrestling it into submission. Think of a skilled dancer. They do not resist the music or attempt to impose their own rigid rhythm upon it. Instead, they listen deeply, feel the beat, and allow the music to move through them. Their movement becomes an expression of the song itself. The result is grace, harmony, beauty, a seamless unity between the dancer and the dance. This is the invitation life offers us, to live not as controllers trying to dictate the music of existence, but as dancers who have learned to listen so intimately to life's rhythm that our very actions become its natural expression. When we align ourselves with this musical flow of reality, we stop wearing ourselves out in the futile attempt to make permanent what is designed to move. Instead, we step into the endless creativity of existence itself, becoming part of its improvisation, part of its symphony. Now, let us bring this understanding down into the very practical details of daily life. Think for a moment about your relationships. How often do you find yourself wanting to hold on tightly to the beautiful moments, trying to freeze them in place as if they could be made permanent? How often do you wish that the people you love would remain exactly as they were at the beginning, unchanged from the moment you first fell in love with them? This is like asking a song to stay on a single note forever. In doing so, we miss the true beauty, which is found in the way relationships, like music, discover their meaning in movement, in growth, and in change. Now consider your career or your creative projects. Do you treat them as if they were mathematical problems, believing that with the right formula, effort, or sequence of steps, the results should be predictable and guaranteed? Or can you allow yourself to approach them as though they were jazz improvisations, where the beauty is not in following a set formula, but in being willing to respond with creativity and openness to whatever arises? Turn inward to your own emotional life. How much of your energy is spent on trying to hold on to pleasant moods, trying to stretch out happiness or peace so that they will last indefinitely? And how much is spent on pushing away or eliminating the feelings you would rather not have? Sadness, anger, fear, or confusion. What would it be like instead to treat your inner states like a piece of music, where every note, whether joyful or sorrowful, harmonious or dissonant, belongs in the larger composition of your human experience? There is a profound freedom in embracing the musical nature of existence. When you no longer feel compelled to control the rhythm, when you stop demanding that life play only your favorite melody, you become open to something much larger and more beautiful than anything you could compose on your own. You begin to sense yourself as part of the great cosmic improvisation that has been playing since the very beginning of time. The ancient Zen masters understood this so deeply that they often spoke of just sitting, not striving to achieve a particular state or to reach a specific goal, but simply being present to whatever arises in this very moment. For them, meditation was never a rigid formula for enlightenment. It was more like music, an invitation to listen so fully to silence that sound could arise naturally, effortlessly, and spontaneously. This is why so many spiritual traditions lean on musical metaphors. The Hindu teaching of Nada Brahma, the understanding that the universe itself is vibration, sound, music. The Christian mystics who described hearing the music of the spheres. The Sufi whirling dervishes who sought the divine through the rhythm of their spinning. Each of these traditions recognized the same truth, that reality at its deepest level is not mechanical, but musical, not static, but dynamic, not fixed, but flowing. And here is the beauty of seeing life in this way. In mathematics, there are right and wrong answers. In music, there are only different expressions, different interpretations, different ways of joining in the ongoing creation. When you make a mistake in mathematics, you have failed. When you strike the wrong note in jazz, you have simply found a new direction for the improvisation to unfold. This understanding radically transforms how we relate to what we usually call mistakes or failures in life. They cease to be evidence that we are doing something wrong. Instead, they become unexpected notes in the greater symphony of our lives, opportunities to weave something new into the melody, moments for creative response rather than proof of inadequacy. The Buddha's teaching on impermanence reveals that this flowing, musical quality is not confined to grand ideas, but is woven into every level of existence. Your thoughts are impermanent. They arise like fleeting notes and dissolve like echoes that fade into silence. Your emotions are impermanent as well, moving through you like melodies, each one complete in itself, each one passing in its own time. Even your physical sensations are impermanent. They rise and fall, pulsing through your body like the steady rhythm that provides structure to a song. And even your sense of being a separate, solid self is impermanent. It is like a melody that seems distinct when heard on its own, yet cannot be separated from the silence that surrounds and contains it. Your individual life is not a fixed and independent thing, but a temporary and beautiful expression of something much larger, deeper, and more mysterious. You are not apart from the music of existence. You are one of its countless instruments, one of its infinite and ever-changing expression. When we truly take this to heart, not just as an intellectual idea, but as a felt reality, something profound begins to shift in how we live. We stop clinging so tightly to specific outcomes because we recognize that the real beauty lies in the act of playing, not in achieving any single result. We stop fearing change as though it were the enemy of stability, because we come to see that change is not the opposite of life's constancy. It is the very condition that makes life possible, the movement that keeps the song alive. There is a story of a famous composer who was once asked which piece of music he loved most. After reflecting for a moment, he replied, "The one I am writing now." When pressed to explain, he said, "Every moment of life is like composing music that has never existed before. The notes I am playing right now, the rhythm I am moving with right now, the harmony I am shaping in this moment. This is always the most beautiful music because it is the only music that actually exists." His words reflect the invitation that life offers us in each moment, to stop treating existence like a problem to be solved, and instead to experience it as a song waiting to be sung, to stop demanding that life obey our rigid formulas, and instead learn to dance with its ever-changing rhythms. Tomorrow morning, when you first wake, try beginning your day not by calculating what must be accomplished or solved, but by listening for the music that is already playing. Notice the rhythm of your own breath. Listen for the melody of the birds outside your window. Feel the harmony between the quiet beating of your heart and the vast pulse of existence itself. Even if only for 5 minutes, experiment with treating the day as a piece of music you are invited to join, rather than a mathematical equation you are burdened to solve. Notice how different this feels. Notice how it transforms your relationship with uncertainty, with change, with the countless unexpected moments that unfold throughout the day. Notice how it softens your need to measure everything against what you believe should be happening, and instead helps you appreciate what actually is happening. The teaching of impermanence is not meant to leave us grieving the transitory nature of all that we love. Its purpose is to awaken us to the extraordinary preciousness of each passing moment. When we understand that this conversation, this sunset, this embrace, this very breath will never appear in exactly this way again, we begin to give it the full attention it deserves. And when we apply this same wisdom to our painful or difficult experiences, we discover that we can stay present with them too, without adding the extra suffering that comes from resisting or wishing them away. Pain itself becomes like a minor key within the symphony of life, not something to reject or avoid, but a note that gives the whole composition its depth, poignancy, and richness. Challenge in life is like syncopation in music, a rhythmic complexity that may seem disruptive at first, yet ultimately makes the melody more engaging, more alive. It is not a flaw that ruins the song, but an unexpected shift that adds richness and texture to the whole composition. As we continue this journey together, we are learning to see life not as a rigid mathematical equation to be solved, but as a living symphony in which we are invited to play. The goal is not to control the music, but to participate consciously in it, to discover what it means to dance with change instead of resisting it, to improvise with uncertainty instead of becoming paralyzed by it. This is the art of living, not as frustrated mathematicians seeking neat solutions, but as attuned musicians, listening, responding, and flowing with the rhythm of existence. For now, simply pause and listen. In this very moment, there is already a symphony unfolding. Your breath is part of the music. The steady rhythm of your heartbeat is part of the music. The sound of these words entering your awareness is part of the music. Even the silence between your thoughts belongs to it, shaping the melody as much as any sound. You do not need to compose this symphony or control it, or even fully understand it. You only need to recognize that you are already part of it, already moving in harmony with its endless improvisation. Reality itself is music, not mathematics. Life is flow, not formula. And you are both the instrument and the musician, both the dancer and the dance, both the note and the silence that gives the note meaning. This recognition alone has the power to transform everything. It shifts each moment from being a problem to solve into a movement to embody, from an equation to calculate into a song, to be sung with the whole of your being. This leads us into a profound insight, how your inner state becomes the outer echo of your life. There is a simple truth that can radically change how you move through each day. It is this: you do not smile because the world has first been kind to you. Rather, you smile, and the world, more often than not, returns the gesture. At first glance, this might seem like a small detail, almost too simple to matter. Yet contained within it is one of the most powerful reversals of understanding available to us. Most of us are conditioned to believe that we live in reaction to the world around us. We assume that our inner state is shaped by external circumstances. We wait for reasons to feel joy, for conditions to be safe enough for peace, for events to give us permission to be happy. We wait for the world to smile first, and only then do we allow ourselves to soften and respond. But what if it works the other way around? What if your inner life is not merely a reaction, but the starting point? What if the quality of your inner state is not just a reflection of the outer world, but a force that actively shapes it? What if your thoughts, emotions, and inner posture ripple outward, creating the very texture of the reality you experience? The Buddha understood this truth so profoundly that he made it the opening statement of one of his most enduring teachings. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. Notice carefully, he did not say, all that happens to us. He said, all that we are. It is our thoughts, our attitude, our fundamental way of relating to existence that forms the basis of our lived experience. These inner states do not merely color how we perceive reality. They participate directly in creating it. This understanding is transformative. It reveals that life is not simply something that happens to us while we passively react. Instead, life is something we are co-creating in every moment through the music of our inner state. It means you are not a victim of circumstances, waiting helplessly for life to finally improve so that you can feel better. Instead, it means you are a creative participant in the ongoing emergence of reality itself, and the state of your inner world is the primary tool with which you create. This becomes most obvious in the simplest, most ordinary moments of daily life. Imagine walking into a coffee shop on a hectic morning. If you enter with an inner state of hurry, irritation, and demand, needing your coffee quickly, resenting the line, impatient with the process, you radiate a particular kind of energy. Everyone around you can feel it. The barista feels it. The other customers feel it. That field of energy often provokes others to become more rushed, more defensive, more closed in on themselves. But picture the same scene approached differently. Imagine entering that coffee shop with an inner state of spaciousness, ease, and genuine appreciation. Not because you are forcing positivity or pretending that everything in life is perfect, but because you have remembered something essential about the way reality works. You have remembered that your inner state is not a passive reaction to what happens around you, but a gift you actively offer to the world. When you step up to the counter with genuine presence and offer a smile that arises from inner fullness rather than outer need, something subtle yet powerful shifts in the entire exchange. The barista feels noticed and appreciated. Other customers seem to relax. The atmosphere itself becomes slightly warmer, more human, more alive. This shift does not happen because you manipulated anyone but because you contributed your inner state instead of withholding it, until the world proved it was worthy of your kindness. This is what it truly means to act from fullness rather than from lack. Most of us have been conditioned to save our best states for later, to hoard our joy, our peace, our generosity, until external conditions seem to justify their expression. We tell ourselves that we will be generous when we feel abundant, we will be loving when others show us love, we will be peaceful once circumstances finally settle into calm. Yet this habit keeps us bound to dependency. It makes our inner lives forever hostage to whatever is happening outside us. There is an old story that illustrates this truth with great clarity. A traveler once came to the edge of a small town and encountered an old man sitting at the gate. Curious, the traveler asked, "What are the people like in this town?" The old man looked at him and replied with his own question. "Tell me, what were the people like in the town you just left?" The traveler scowled and said, "They were terrible, selfish, unkind, suspicious. I couldn't wait to leave that place." The old man sighed gently and said, "I'm afraid you will find the people here to be much the same." Later that day, another traveler approached the same old man with the very same question. Again, the old man asked, "What were the people like in the town you just left?" This second traveler smiled fondly and replied, "They were wonderful, kind, generous, welcoming. I was truly sad to leave such good people." The old man's face lit up with a bright smile. "Then you will find the people here are exactly the same." This simple story reveals something profound. The world tends to reflect back to us the very quality of consciousness that we bring to it. The world is not inherently kind or inherently cruel, inherently hostile or inherently loving. Its flavor, its tone, its quality is shaped in no small measure by the state of being with which we meet it. Reality is responsive. It reflects back the energy we bring to it, amplifies the frequency we broadcast, and collaborates with us in shaping a reality that mirrors our inner state. But it's important to be clear about what this understanding does not imply. It isn't about practicing blind positive thinking or pretending that difficulties don't exist. It isn't about blaming yourself when painful circumstances arise, or believing that sheer mental force allows you to control every outcome. Instead, it points to something far more subtle and profound. Your inner state, your most fundamental way of being, the quality of your attention, your posture toward existence, creates a living field of influence around you. This field interacts with the world, and while not mechanical, magical, or absolute, it is powerful enough that experiences often emerge that resonate with the energy you are radiating. Not every time, not in ways that override natural laws, but with such consistency that working consciously with this principle can reshape the way you move through daily life in extraordinary ways. The Buddha's teaching that all that we are is the result of what we have thought points deeper than the popular idea that thoughts alone create reality. What it reveals is the recognition that consciousness is never truly separate from what it perceives. The observer and the observed, the experiencer and the experienced, are not two distinct entities, but two faces of one seamless process. When this becomes clear, you realize that adjusting your inner state is not simply about feeling better within yourself. It is about participating in the very creation of the world you experience. It is about recognizing that your consciousness is not confined within the edges of your body, but radiates outward, merging with the field of life itself and playing an active role in shaping it. Seen in this light, this understanding has the power to transform every domain of life. Take relationships, for example. Instead of waiting for others to soften first, to be more open or loving before you dare to show your heart, you can choose to lead with love, not as a tactic to win affection in return, but as a recognition that love is not something you must earn. It is something you already are. From this place of inner fullness, relationships begin to shift. Others sense that it is safe to be authentic. They feel invited to share their own natural capacity for love. This is not manipulation. It is the environment that love creates when it is allowed to shine freely. The same principle applies to work. Instead of holding back until you are praised, validated, or recognized before you feel confident and capable, you can choose to embody the energy of someone who knows they have something meaningful to contribute. This doesn't mean posturing with arrogance or inflating yourself with pretense. It simply means bringing your presence, your enthusiasm, and your attention wholeheartedly into what you are doing, regardless of whether applause comes right away. When you contribute from fullness instead of from need, opportunities and recognition often arise naturally, mirroring the energy you are already living from. And in the realm of money, the same truth holds. Instead of postponing the feeling of abundance until your bank account looks the way you think it should, you can practice embodying abundance now with what you already have. This means treating your resources with care, with gratitude, with respect. It means practicing generosity within your current means, making decisions from trust rather than fear, and allowing the energy of sufficiency to replace the mindset of lack. From this shift in consciousness, your outer reality often begins to realign, creating more opportunities for the abundance you are already inhabiting. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this teaching is that the gesture itself, the decision to smile, the choice to act with kindness, the willingness to live from fullness, contains its own reward. The world may reflect it back to you, but even if it does not in any obvious or immediate way, the act of giving from abundance rather than waiting in lack transforms the very quality of your own experience. You don't embody this way of living in order to manipulate results. You do it because it is simply a more joyful way to exist. You do it because there is genuine relief in moving through the world as a source of nourishment rather than as a vessel waiting to be filled. And while it often does invite warm, generous responses from others, that becomes a welcome bonus rather than the motivation. The freedom comes from knowing that your inner state belongs to you. It is not a sentence handed down by circumstances, but a choice you can make again and again. This realization dissolves the old dependence on external conditions for well-being. It means you can choose peace, even when situations are turbulent. You can choose generosity, even when your resources feel limited. You can choose love, even when others make it difficult. This is not about pretending or suppressing how you feel. It is about uncovering the deepest layer of truth within you, that at your core, your authentic state is one of fullness, not emptiness. The ancient Vedantic teaching Tattvam Asi, thou art that, points to the same recognition. What you search for outside is already present within you. The love you crave from others is something you are capable of radiating. The peace you long to find in the world is a state you can embody here and now. The abundance you hope to one day experience is an energy you can already express through how you meet your current circumstances. This is not lofty metaphysics. It is practical wisdom for living with maximum vitality and minimum suffering. You can meet difficulty with presence instead of resistance. You can face uncertainty with curiosity instead of panic. You can respond to hardship with dignity instead of bitterness. And when you choose these more conscious responses, challenges often move through more cleanly. They resolve with less additional suffering, not because you magically thought them away, but because you stopped piling layers of mental struggle and emotional resistance on top of what was already difficult. By working with reality rather than fighting against it, you discover a kind of resilience that doesn't depend on life being easy, but on your willingness to meet it fully. There is another dimension of this teaching that becomes especially powerful in our interconnected world. Every interaction, no matter how small, is a chance to contribute to the collective consciousness of humanity. When you choose to respond to difficulty with wisdom instead of reactivity, you're not just benefiting yourself, you are adding a note of clarity and sanity to the wider human conversation. You are quietly showing that it is possible to remain centered in chaos, compassionate in conflict, and peaceful in uncertainty. The world today is hungry for people who understand that their inner state is not a private matter, but a gift to the collective whole. In an era where unconscious reactivity spreads with lightning speed through social media and mass communication, the choice to embody presence, wisdom, and compassion becomes a genuine form of service. Your smile doesn't just soften your own environment, it ripples outward into the invisible fabric of human awareness. This is why waiting for the world to become better before you allow yourself to feel free is like waiting for silence to arrive before beginning a song. It is the song that gives birth to silence, not the other way around. In the same way, your inner freedom creates conditions for others to feel freer. It is not something you can postpone until the outer world grants permission. The Buddha taught that this principle works at the most fundamental level of existence. Consciousness is not a detached spectator of reality. It actively participates in shaping it. This doesn't mean you can think your way into any outcome you desire. Rather, it means that the quality of consciousness you bring into any situation becomes woven into that situation itself, influencing how it unfolds. When this understanding sinks in, you begin to see your inner state not as a burden to control, but as a creative opportunity. Every moment presents a choice. Will you contribute chaos or peace to this circumstance? Will you add fear or love to this exchange? Will you bring an energy of lack or one of fullness into this experience? These choices are never insignificant. They not only shape your personal life, they affect everyone who encounters you and every space you touch. Your inner state becomes part of the atmosphere, part of the field, part of the living reality that others enter when they are near you. This is both a profound responsibility and a profound gift. It means you have far more influence over the texture of life than you may have believed, but it also means that this influence asks to be used consciously, with an awareness that your inner state matters not just for you, but for the world at large. And right now, in this very moment, you have the chance to test this principle directly. Instead of waiting for external conditions to give you permission to feel at ease, experiment with choosing peace as something you offer to the present. Not because your life is flawless, but because peace is a contribution you can give, rather than a commodity you must first receive. Notice how these different from straining to force peace or manufacture calm. When you approach it as a gift, there is no struggle, no effort to maintain. It becomes a simple recognition of what is already available, something you can access at any time you remember. Your inner state is your choice, not your center. So the next time you catch yourself waiting for the world to smile at you first, pause and remember this deeper truth. Your smile, your inner state of appreciation, presence, and fullness is not a reaction to external kindness. It is a choice, a gift, a creative act that actively shapes the reality you experience. You don't smile because the world is kind. You smile, and often the world reflects that smile back to you. The same is true with abundance, with love, with freedom, and with peace. These qualities are not prizes you earn from an outside world, but treasures discovered within and shared generously with a world that is quietly waiting for someone to go first. That someone, the one who chooses to embody what they long to see, who acts from fullness instead of waiting for fullness to arrive, can be you, right here. Not because you are extraordinary or different, but because you've remembered something that has always been true. Your inner world is the starting point, not the response. And when you live from that starting point, the field of possibility opens in ways you could not imagine before. Yet there is a powerful tendency that holds many of us back, a subtle habit that keeps us perpetually on the sidelines of our own lives. It is the tendency to wait for silence before beginning our song, to wait for proof before allowing ourselves to believe, to wait for evidence before placing faith in what we feel, to wait for external validation before trusting our inner knowing. And this waiting costs us everything. While we hold back, preparing for the perfect moment, the perfect conditions, the perfect proof that it's finally safe to step into our fullness, life continues to move forward without our full participation. We remain spectators of our own existence, always rehearsing, always preparing, but never quite living. To wait until you are free before you allow yourself to feel free is as futile as waiting for silence to create music. Silence doesn't generate music. It is music that gives silence its meaning. In the same way, freedom doesn't arrive as a gift you wait to receive. Freedom emerges when you act as if you are already free, and in the very act of living from that place, you discover that the freedom you were waiting for was available all along. The Buddha understood this principle so deeply that he made it the foundation of his noble eightfold path. The very first step is called right view, or samadhi in Sanskrit. But right view is not about holding the correct opinions or memorizing the proper beliefs. It is about seeing clearly, about recognizing truth directly, without the need for external proof to validate what you already perceive. It is about trusting your own capacity to see reality as it is, without waiting for the world to confirm what your deeper knowing has already revealed. Most of us have been trained in the opposite approach. We have learned to say, "Show me, and then I'll believe." We've been conditioned to think that wisdom comes only after we've gathered enough evidence, enough external validation, enough proof that it's finally safe to trust our own experience. But this approach keeps us perpetually dependent on outside authority for what should be our inner knowing. The language of "show me and I'll believe" is the language of delay, the language of postponement. It is the voice of hesitation, of waiting for permission from the world before trusting what we already know to be true within ourselves. But there is another language available to us, the language of creation, which says, "I believe, and therefore I see." This is not blind faith, nor is it wishful thinking. It is the recognition that true belief, genuine belief that lives deeper than intellectual agreement, is actually a way of seeing. When you truly believe something is possible, you begin to notice resources, opportunities, and pathways that were invisible to you before. When you truly believe in your own worth, you naturally begin to attract experiences and relationships that mirror that worth back to you. And when you truly believe in your capacity for peace, you start to find that peace revealing itself in places you never thought to look. There's a story that illustrates this truth beautifully. Once there was a young musician with tremendous talent, but she was terrified of performing in public. She practiced endlessly, pouring her heart into her music behind closed doors, dreaming of the day she could share her gift. Yet every time an opportunity arose, she found a reason to postpone. "I'm not ready yet," she told herself. "I need more practice. I need to be perfect before I let others hear me." The years slipped by, and with them grew her frustration. She was waiting for readiness, waiting for confidence to arrive like a visitor from outside, waiting for a sign from the world that it was finally safe to share her gift. One day, an old teacher came to visit and listened quietly as she practiced. Afterward, the teacher said, "Your music is beautiful. When will you share it with the world?" The young woman sighed and replied, "When I'm ready, when I finally feel confident enough." The teacher smiled with kindness and shook their head. "My dear, Confidence doesn't come from feeling ready. Confidence comes from choosing to share your gift before you feel ready. The audience doesn't need your perfection. They need your willingness to offer what you already have. In that moment, something shifted in her understanding. She realized she had been waiting for silence, waiting for her fears to vanish completely before beginning her song. But that evening, instead of postponing yet again, she made a different choice. She walked into a small local cafe and performed, not because she suddenly felt ready, but because she finally understood that readiness is born through action, not before it. As she sang, she discovered something remarkable. Her fear did not disappear, but it no longer ruled her. Her fear and her courage coexisted. Her uncertainty and her gift both stood side by side in that moment, woven into the same performance. And in that space, she discovered a freedom she had never known. This is the essence of the shift from show me and I'll believe to I believe and therefore I see. The young musician didn't wait for evidence that she was good enough. She chose to believe in her worth as an artist and acted from that belief. And in the very act of offering her gift, she saw truths, opportunities, and possibilities that she could never have glimpsed while she was still waiting. She began to see with fresh clarity that audiences respond far more deeply to authenticity than to perfection. She discovered that vulnerability is what creates real connection, and that the very imperfections she once tried to hide were actually an inseparable part of her unique gift. The Buddha's teaching on right view points to the same principle at the heart of spiritual understanding. He never said, practice until you feel enlightened, and then you'll know you are enlightened. Instead, his teaching was, see clearly that enlightenment is your nature, and then practice from that recognition. The seeing comes first, not the proof. This insight reveals why so many people remain stuck in the cycle of seeking for decades. They are waiting for a dramatic spiritual experience, for some undeniable sign, for external validation that will finally prove they've made it. But enlightenment is not a special event or an experience to collect. It is the simple recognition of what you already are, and that recognition is available now, not as the distant result of future striving, but as the very foundation for present moment awareness. Bringing this understanding into daily life makes the principle even more practical. How often do you find yourself waiting for evidence before you trust yourself? How often do you postpone action until the feeling of confidence magically arrives? How often do you hold back from sharing your gifts until you are absolutely certain they will be received well? These patterns of hesitation are subtle, but they keep us perpetually on the sideline. In relationships, for example, many people wait for proof that they are loved before daring to fully open their hearts. But love does not work that way. Love is not something you passively wait to receive. It is something you actively offer. When you choose to love first, when you open your heart without guarantees, you create the very space in which love can be returned. You shift from being a seeker of love to becoming a source of love. The same truth applies in creative endeavors. So many wait until they feel inspired before they begin to create. But in reality, inspiration usually arrives through the act of creating, not before it. The painter does not wait for the perfect image to appear in their mind before touching brush to canvas. They begin with a willingness to explore, to play, to experiment, and through that openness, the vision reveals its creativity is born through excess, not through waiting for the flawless idea. The pattern repeats itself in the pursuit of dreams and goals. Countless people delay until circumstances feel perfect before daring to act. But circumstances are rarely, if ever, perfect, and waiting for them to align often means waiting forever. The entrepreneur does not wait for guaranteed success before starting a business. The writer does not wait for the perfect story to descend fully formed before they begin to write. They start with vision, with possibility, with a willingness to learn, adapt, and grow as the process unfolds. This is the great divide between the language of delay and the language of creation. The language of delay says, when this happens, then I will do that. It binds you to the future and keeps you waiting endlessly for the right condition. The language of creation says, I will do this now, and then I'll see what happens. It moves you forward. One locks you in hesitation, while the other keeps you alive, moving, and participating in the unfolding flow of life. The Buddha's teaching on right view reveals that this principle operates at the most fundamental level of perception itself. What you believe to be possible directly shapes what you are able to see. What you hold to be true influences which experiences become able to you. This doesn't happen in some magical way that overrides reality. It unfolds in practical ways, by shaping where you place your attention, what opportunities you recognize, and what actions you're willing to take. A famous psychology experiment illustrates this beautifully. Participants are asked to watch a video of basketball players and count how many times the players in white pass the ball. While they concentrate on counting, a person in a gorilla suit walks right through the middle of the game. Astonishingly, most people never notice the gorilla at all, even though it is in plain sight for several seconds. Their belief about what they were supposed to be looking for determined what they could actually see. This same principle is at work in every area of life. If you believe that opportunities are scarce, you will continually notice scarcity and overlook the abundance that quietly surrounds you. If you believe people are fundamentally untrustworthy, you will focus on evidence that confirms this suspicion and dismiss the kindness and generosity available all around you. If you believe you are incapable of achieving your dreams, you will see obstacles everywhere and ignore the possibilities right in front of you. But when you shift your fundamental view, when you choose to believe in possibility, in abundance, and in your own capacity for growth and contribution, you begin to see what was once invisible. Opportunities that were always present reveal themselves. Resources that were always available suddenly become accessible. Connections that were always possible finally begin to take shape. This is the essence of right view. It is not about adopting the right beliefs in a rigid or dogmatic sense. It is about seeing without the distorting filters of fear and doubt, without the limiting overlays of unexamined assumptions. It is about recognizing that what you take to be objective reality is in fact shaped by the consciousness through which you perceive it. There is another aspect of this teaching that feels especially relevant in our current culture. We live in an age that worships data, evidence, and scientific proof, each of which holds tremendous value. But alongside this, we have grown increasingly suspicious of intuition, inner knowing, and direct experience. We have learned to trust experts and external authorities more than our own innate capacity for wisdom. The Buddha's teaching on right view does not dismiss the importance of evidence or rational thought. Rather, it reminds us that there are also forms of knowing that transcend the purely analytical. There is a kind of understanding that arises only through direct experience, a wisdom that cannot be measured but can be lived, presence, and the willingness to trust what you know, even when you cannot prove it to others, lies at the heart of this teaching. Nowhere is this more important than in understanding your own worth, your own capacity, and your own potential. No external authority can hand you definitive proof that your life matters, that you are valuable, or that you carry something unique to contribute. These recognitions rise from within, born through the direct experience of your own being, and they require courage. The courage to trust your inner knowing even when the world outside has not yet mirrored it back to you. A profound story from the Zen tradition illustrates this beautifully. A student once approached a master and said, I have been practicing meditation for years, but I still do not feel enlightened. How will I know when I have achieved awakening?" The master looked at him and replied, "The one who asks that question is already awake. Who is it that is aware of not feeling enlightened? Who is it that knows there is such a thing as enlightenment to seek? The very awareness that can observe the search is the very thing you are searching for." At that moment, the student realized he had been waiting for some special experience to prove his awakening. Yet the awareness already alive within him, the consciousness that could watch his thoughts, feelings, and longings, was itself what he had been seeking all along. He did not need to wait for proof. He only needed to recognize what was already present. This is the essence of not waiting for silence to begin your song. The song does not demand perfect conditions. The act of singing creates the conditions it needs, simply by being sung. In the same way, your life does not require flawless circumstances before it can be fully lived. It is your full participation in life that generates the very conditions that allow for even deeper, fuller living. Still, it is natural that fear arises when people first encounter this teaching. A common question surfaces: what if I am wrong? What if I believe in something and it does not work out? What if I act on my inner knowing and make a mistake? To this, the Buddha's response would be disarmingly simple. What if you are right? What if your inner knowing is more trustworthy than you have ever been taught to believe? What if the act of trusting yourself is the very thing that generates the conditions to sustain that trust? Waiting for proof before you act deprives you of discovery. Even if your choices sometimes lead to mistakes, even if your inner knowing guides you toward outcomes different than you expected, is that not still better than never trusting yourself at all? Is it not more alive to participate fully in your own unfolding than to stand on the sidelines, passively receiving whatever life happens to deliver? The person who waits for proof before believing will always lag a step behind, but the one who recognizes that belief itself is the proof, that clarity comes before validation, that true seeing happens before external confirmation, such a person steps into the stream of life with courage, and there discovers the very freedom they have been waiting for. The person who embraces this truth moves through life as a creative force rather than a reactive victim, and what makes this understanding especially beautiful is the freedom it unlocks. When you stop waiting for permission from the external world to trust your inner knowing, you open yourself to a guidance that has always been present, but often overlooked. The intuitive nudges, the sudden bursts of inspiration, the quiet whispers of wisdom that arise deep within you. These no longer feel like doubtful suggestions, but instead become trusted companions. You begin to recognize that the wisdom you seek does not come solely from books, experts, or external authorities. It flows from the same intelligence that orchestrates the stars, grows the trees, and sustains the rhythm of your own heart. This intelligence does not need to prove itself before you can trust it. It only asks for your willingness to listen, to be still, and to act from the clarity that emerges when you are present. This is why the Buddha described it as right view, for it forms the foundation of all skillful action. When you see clearly and honor your capacity for direct knowing, you can respond to life from wisdom rather than fear, from presence rather than reactivity, from inner authority rather than external dependency. This does not mean you abandon practical concerns or dismiss thoughtful planning. Instead, it means you learn to balance the insights of the outer world with the wisdom of your inner world. You weave together practical information and intuitive guidance, analytical reasoning, and direct knowing, creating a life that is both grounded and inspired. Living this way transforms you into someone who navigates the world skillfully while remaining anchored in the deeper intelligence always available within. And as we continue exploring this path together, We will look at what it truly means to live from such inner authority, to make decisions from presence rather than fear, to act from vision rather than from circumstance, to sing your song before the silence comes. For now it is enough to simply notice. Where in your life are you still waiting for proof before you believe? Where are you holding back, postponing action until you feel completely ready? Where are you deferring to external validation instead of trusting the inner knowing already alive within you? And then, consider this possibility. What if you already possess everything you need to take the next step? What if your inner knowing is far more reliable than you were ever led to believe? What if the very act of trusting yourself is what creates the evidence you have been waiting for all along? You do not need silence to begin your song. What you need is the courage to sing into whatever noise surrounds you, trusting that your voice will find its place, that your song will carve out its own space, that your willingness to begin is all the permission you will ever need. This was the Buddha's insight 2,500 years ago, and it remains as urgent and relevant today as it was then. Right view is not about looking for the right things to notice or waiting for the world to validate your perception. It is about seeing clearly, without hesitation, without waiting for external permission to trust what you already deep with. It is about belief, not belief as blind faith, but belief as a way of seeing, a way of knowing, a way of participating in the creation of reality, rather than simply reacting to it. So sing your song, not because the silence has already arrived to receive it, but because the very act of singing gives birth to the silence it requires. Act from your knowing, not because life has handed you guarantees, but because action grounded in inner wisdom creates its own confirmation. Live from your truth, not because the world has validated it, but because living truthfully is the only way truth can ever reveal itself. This is the courage the Buddha pointed to when he spoke of right view. It is the courage to see clearly and to act from that clarity, regardless of whether the world offers proof or applause. It is the courage to believe first, and in doing so, to see rather than endlessly waiting to see before allowing yourself to believe. It is the courage to sing your song into whatever silence or noise surrounds you, trusting that the act of singing is its own justification, its own proof, its own perfect and complete expression of being fully alive. From climbing to realizing you are the peak, there comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the most profound shift possible occurs. It may not appear dramatic from the outside, nor does it always arrive as a mystical revelation, though it can feel like both. It is the quiet, luminous moment when you realize you are no longer climbing the mountain. You are realizing you are the mountain. This recognition changes everything, and yet, on the surface, nothing changes at all. A beautiful Zen teaching captures this paradox with perfect simplicity. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The tasks remain unchanged, yet the one performing them has undergone a complete transformation of understanding. For most of our lives, we operate under a deeply ingrained assumption that we are separate individuals climbing towards some distant peak. We perceive ourselves as limited beings, straining toward unlimited states, as incomplete souls, longing for completion, as lost travelers, searching desperately for a way back home. This belief fuels the drama of seeking, striving, and struggling that shapes so much of human experience. But what if this fundamental assumption is mistaken? What if you are not a climber ascending the mountain of existence at all? What if you are, in truth, the mountain itself, momentarily forgetting its own vastness? What if the goal you have been chasing is not separate from you, but is instead the very essence of the one who seeks? This recognition does not come from more effort, more practice, or more knowledge. It comes from a simple but radical shift in perspective, from the illusion of separation to the recognition of wholeness, from the struggle of climbing to the realization of already. It is like suddenly realizing that what you thought was a rope in the dim light was actually a snake, or what you thought was a snake was in fact just a rope. The facts themselves have not 10, yet your entire relationship to them transforms completely. What was once a source of fear or longing becomes in an instant something entirely different. This is the nature of awakening. The world itself may appear unchanged, but the way you see it, the way you relate to it, alters everything. Let me share a story that captures this transformation with remarkable clarity. There was once a wave that spent its entire existence striving to reach the ocean. It would rise as high as possible, stretch itself farther and farther, always believing that somewhere ahead lay the vast ocean it longed to touch. Looking at other waves, it felt envious of those that seemed closer to their destination. With great effort, it would crash against the shore, hoping desperately that this time, this final effort, would at last deliver it to the ocean of its dream. But one day, worn out from all its striving, the wave became still, and in that stillness, something dawned on it with perfect simplicity and truth. It had never been separate from the ocean, not even for a single moment. Every drop of its being was already ocean. Every movement it had ever made was the ocean itself in motion. Even its very act of seeking the ocean had always been nothing other than the ocean seeking itself. The wave realized, with awe and relief, that it was not moving toward the ocean. It was the ocean temporarily appearing in the form of a wave. This is the shift from climbing to simply being, from imagining oneself as a seeker, striving toward a distant summit, to realizing that one is in fact the mountain itself. It is the recognition that enlightenment is not a goal waiting in the future, but one's very nature temporarily appearing as someone trying to achieve it. This is precisely what the Buddha was pointing to when he spoke of Buddha nature, the understanding that what you are searching for, you already are, not as a seed waiting to develop into something greater, not as a potential that requires years of effort to manifest, but as a reality that has always been fully present, awaiting recognition. The mountain does not need to climb itself to reach its peak. It already is the peak, the slope, the base, and the entire foundation. It only needs to see itself as such. Yet we must not leave this insight in the realm of metaphor alone. The real transformation comes when it touches the ground of our daily lives. What does it mean to live from the recognition that you are the mountain, not the climber? First, it means releasing the illusion of reality as a linear path. To see yourself as a climber is to imagine there is only one narrow route to the top, one correct way to move forward, one sequence of steps that must be accomplished in order to attain fulfillment. But when you recognize yourself as the mountain, the perspective changes completely. Suddenly you see that all possible paths exist simultaneously. Every version of yourself, the peaceful one, the creative one, the wise one, the loving one, is already here, already woven into the vast field of your being. This recognition dissolves the anxiety that comes with linear time. No longer do you fear falling behind or missing opportunities, for you realize that in the timeless dimension of your true nature, every possibility is eternally present. The version of you that holds everything you long for is not somewhere in the distance, waiting for you to catch up. It exists now, within the infinite field of potential that you already are. You can test this truth directly, not as a concept, but as an immediate experience. As you hear these words, notice there is already a part of you that feels peaceful. You do not have to create this peace, nor work toward it, nor prove yourself worthy of it. You simply have to recognize it. It is already here, always accessible, always part of your very being. Peace is not something you climb toward, as though it waits for you at the end of a long and difficult ascent. Peace is what you already are, temporarily appearing to yourself as someone seeking it, and the same is true of every quality you have ever longed for: confidence, love, creativity, wisdom, abundance. None of these exist as distant peaks to be conquered or external treasures to be earned. They are already present within the vast field of your being, waiting not for achievement, but for recognition and expression. This understanding transforms the very way you relate to goals and dreams. Instead of asking, "How can I become confident?" you begin to ask, "How can I express the confidence that already lives within me?" Instead of seeking love from others, you inquire, "How can I share the love that I am?" Instead of searching endlessly for a purpose, you turn inward with curiosity. "How can I express the unique essence that is already whole and complete within me?" The Zen teaching about chopping wood and carrying water speaks directly to this shift. When you recognize that you are the mountain rather than the climber, life does not suddenly lift you above the world of ordinary tasks. You do not float above responsibilities or become too spiritual for daily concerns. You still chop wood and carry water. You still pay bills, go to work, have conversations, and face difficulties. But the quality of presence that flows through these actions transforms entirely. Before this recognition, you chop wood in order to stay warm and carry water in order to quench thirst. After the recognition, you chop wood as an expression of the completeness you already are, and you carry water as a celebration of the fullness that moves through you. Outwardly, the actions remain unchanged. Inwardly, they become expressions of being rather than attempts at becoming. This shift also reshapes every relationship in your life. From the perspective of the climber, you approach relationships with need. You look to others to validate your worth, to fill your emptiness, to lift you to emotional peaks you imagine yourself lacking. But when you awaken to your nature as the mountain, you enter relationships from fullness. You no longer require others to complete you, because you know that completeness is your very essence. From this place, you can meet others as they truly are, appreciating them not for what they can give you, but for the unique expression of life they embody. Your work life, too, undergoes a quiet but profound transformation. Instead of climbing the career ladder to prove your value, you begin to express your value through the work itself, whatever form it takes. Instead of chasing success as a remedy for inner emptiness, you bring your inherent fullness into every act of creation. Success ceases to be something you pursue at the end of a path, and becomes instead the quality of presence you carry along the path itself. Success is no longer a destination, it is a way of being. There is a beautiful story from the Tibetan tradition that illuminates this truth. A devoted student spent years meditating alone in a cave, pouring himself into the pursuit of enlightenment through intense spiritual practice. One day, a simple village woman walked past the cave of a devoted seeker as she carried water from the river. She paused, noticing him sitting in deep meditation, and curiously asked what he was doing. With great seriousness, he replied, "I am seeking enlightenment. I have been practicing for many years to attain the highest spiritual realization." The woman gently set down her water jug and laughed softly. "My dear friend," she said, "what you are seeking is already looking for you through your own eyes. What you are trying so hard to achieve is, in truth, trying to achieve you through your very efforts. The mountain you are struggling to climb is the same mountain you are already sitting upon." In that moment, the seeker was struck by a profound recognition. His years of striving, his disciplined practices, and his endless pursuit of enlightenment had not been leading him toward a distant goal. They had been enlightenment itself, expressing through the act of seeking. His meditation was not a tool to reach unity, but unity itself appearing as the practice of meditation. He was never a separate being, struggling to become whole. He was wholeness all along, temporarily appearing as one who believed he was incomplete. This realization is not reserved for saints or sages, but is available to everyone in every moment. It does not require decades of meditation or extraordinary spiritual visions. It only requires the willingness to notice what is already here, what has always been true, and what is unshakably complete within your very existence. Within you lies the field of infinite possibility, containing every version of your simultaneously, the wise you, the foolish you, the confident you, the hesitant you, the loving you, and the fearful you. These are not separate identities you must strive to become in the future. They are all expressions of the same consciousness, available to be embodied the very moment you recognize them. When seen from this perspective, the idea of wasted time disappears. Every moment of seeking, every attempt at self-improvement, every struggle, and every failure, all of it has been consciousness exploring itself through different forms. The mountain never laments its jagged cliffs or resents its steep inclines. These are the very features that give it majesty and character. In the same way, your challenges, flaws, and imperfections are not errors to be erased, but integral aspects, the vast landscape of your being. They contribute to your depth, your uniqueness, and your beauty. This recognition does not mean you become passive or stop growing. Mountains are never static. They are continually shifting, weathering, and transforming, yet they do not do so out of inadequacy. Their changes arise from their nature, from the simple fact of their existence. Likewise, when you recognize yourself as the mountain, growth ceases to be a desperate quest to fix what is broken and becomes instead the natural unfolding of what you already are. You may still set goals, pursue dreams, and strive toward meaningful achievements, but these actions will no longer come from a place of lack. They will arise as natural expressions of your fullness. These activities, whether in work, relationships, or creativity, arise not from the pain of incompletion, but from the joy of expression. You create not because something is missing within you, but because creation is the natural overflow of the fullness you already are. You love not because you crave to be loved in return, but because love is the fundamental essence of your being. The Zen masters understood this truth with remarkable clarity. They often gave their students seemingly impossible tasks, like the famous koan, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" Such riddles were never meant to be solved by the intellect. Instead, they were designed to exhaust the mind's restless striving, to collapse the endless effort of seeking. When the seeking mind finally surrendered and dissolved under its own weight, what remained was the recognition that had always been present. The one who was seeking was, in fact, what had been sought all along. This is why enlightenment is so often described as both the most extraordinary and the most ordinary of realization. Extraordinary, because it completely overturns and revolutionizes your understanding of who and what you truly are. Ordinary, because it alters nothing about your actual essence. It does not add anything new. It merely reveals what has always been true. You are already the peak you have been struggling to reach. You are already the peace you have been searching for. You are already the love you thought you needed to find outside yourself. You are already the wisdom you have been striving to acquire. These are not lofty concepts to be believed as abstract ideas. They are the living reality of your deepest nature, always present, waiting only to be recognized. And the beauty of this recognition is that it does not demand special circumstances, rare conditions, or ideal environments. It is available here and now, in whatever situation you currently find yourself. No matter how far you feel from spiritual or personal ideals, the mountain does not wait for perfect weather before it stands as a mountain. It is what it is in every season, under all conditions, through every change. As we approach the closing of this journey together, we now turn to the question of living from this recognition, what it means to chop wood and carry water, not as the climber endlessly striving, but as the mountain resting in its own completeness. We will discover how ordinary life, unchanged in its outer form, becomes utterly extraordinary when lived from the understanding that you are not separate from what you seek. But for this moment, allow yourself simply to rest in the possibility. What if you are not a limited being, forever striving toward unlimited states? What if you are limited consciousness, temporarily appearing to itself as someone experiencing apparent limitations? What if the entire journey you have walked has been nothing other than consciousness exploring its own infinite nature, wearing the beautiful disguise of being you? You are no longer climbing the mountain. You are realizing you are the mountain. And from this peak, which has always been your true home, every direction leads you back to yourself. Every step you take is already perfect. Every moment is the arrival you have been seeking all along throughout this magnificent, mysterious, completely ordinary, and utterly extraordinary experience of being human. The wood still needs to be chopped. The water still needs to be carried. Yet now you know who it is that chops and carries. It is not a separate self-seeking completion, but completeness itself, joyfully expressing its own nature through the simple, sacred activities of daily life. This is the recognition that transforms everything while changing nothing. This is the shift from seeking the mountain to realizing you are the mountain. This is the moment of coming home to what you have never, even for a single instant, been apart from. The art of receiving through surrender. There is something about water that teaches us one of life's most essential lessons. If only we are willing to pay attention. Try to grasp water tightly in your hands, and you encounter both frustration and revelation. The harder you squeeze, the more it escapes. The tighter your grip, the faster it slips away. But when you cup your hands gently, water rests there peacefully, available for whatever purpose you need. This simple truth about water reveals something fundamental about the way life itself works. The more you try to force outcomes, the more they seem to elude you. The more desperately you chase happiness, the further it retreats. The more urgently you demand to be loved, the more people seem to pull away. The more you insist that circumstances must align with your desires, the more chaotic everything becomes. But when you learn to hold life lightly, when you can want something without clinging to it, pursue your dreams without demanding them, and love people without possessing them, something magical happens. Life begins to flow towards you instead of away from you. Opportunities appear with surprising ease. Relationships deepen naturally. Solutions reveal themselves in ways you could never have orchestrated through thought. The Buddha understood this principle so deeply that he made it the heart of his third noble truth. He taught that freedom from suffering does not come from getting what we want, but from releasing our attachment to needing things to be different than they are. This teaching, called Nirodha in Sanskrit, points to a radical shift in how we relate to desire, to outcomes, and to life itself. Yet it is important to be clear about what this does not mean. Surrender does not mean passivity. It does not mean abandoning your dreams or tolerating harmful circumstances without response. True surrender is not resignation or defeat. It is something far more intelligent and powerful. It is the art of aligning yourself with the deeper rhythm of life rather than exhausting yourself in opposition to it. Think of a skilled dancer. The dancer does not try to force the music to match their movements. Instead, they listen so deeply to the rhythm that their movements become an effortless expression of what they hear. In surrendering to the music, they discover a freedom of expression that would be impossible through force. This is the kind of surrender that leads not to weakness, but to a new and different kind of power altogether. There is an ancient Taoist story that illustrates this truth with clarity. A master swordsman was once challenged by a younger and stronger opponent, a warrior known for his aggressive, forceful style. When the match began, the young fighter launched himself with tremendous power, swinging his sword with all his might. But the master seemed to barely move. At the last possible moment, he would simply step aside, allowing the young man's energy to carry him past harmlessly. He would yield just enough to let the attack flow by, then gently redirect that force back toward its source. The harder the young warrior fought, the more exhausted he became. The more energy he poured into the fight, the more that energy was turned against him. Finally, completely depleted, the young warrior collapsed. The master had triumphed without striking a single aggressive blow, simply by understanding how to work with force rather than against it. This is the essence of what the Buddha taught about non-attachment. It is not about becoming indifferent to outcomes or adopting a cold detachment from life. Rather, it is about learning to engage fully while holding preferences lightly. It is about pursuing your goals with enthusiasm, yet remaining unattached to any specific result. It is about loving people deeply while allowing them the freedom to be exactly who they are. Consider how this principle unfolds in the most practical areas of daily life. Take relationships, for instance. When you grasp desperately at someone's affection, when you try to control their responses, manipulate their feelings, or demand their attention, you inevitably create the kind of pressure that pushes people away. It is like trying to squeeze water. The tighter your grip, the faster it slips through your fingers. But when you can love without needing to possess, when you can appreciate another without demanding that they fulfill your expectations, when you can be present with them without hidden agenda, that is when true intimacy becomes possible. People feel safe enough to be authentic around you because they sense that your love does not depend on their performance. They feel free to draw closer because they know they will not be trapped once they do. The same principle applies to your career and creative endeavors. When you approach work with desperate attachment to specific outcomes, when every project must succeed, when every effort must be recognized, when every creation must be praised, you create a subtle tension that often sabotages the very results you desire. Yet when you can give your best effort while letting go of how it is received, when you can pour your heart into your work while releasing control over its reception, when you can create from joy rather than from need, that is when authentic power begins to flow through you. Paradoxically, this kind of non-attachment often produces better outcomes than grasping ever could. There is a story about a famous artist who was commissioned to paint a portrait of a wealthy merchant. The merchant, obsessed with appearances, insisted that he be depicted more handsome than he truly was, with certain unflattering features diminished or erased. The artist tried desperately to satisfy him, revising and adjusting the portrait again and again to match every demand. Yet with each attempt, the painting grew more lifeless, more artificial, drained of spirit. Finally, worn out by the effort to please, the artist surrendered. He stopped trying to manipulate the image and simply painted what he saw, the merchant as he truly was, imperfections and all. But in those imperfections, he revealed dignity, character, and depth that no flattery could capture. When the merchant looked upon this final portrait, he was unexpectedly moved to tears. "This is the first time anyone has truly seen me," the merchant said. What the artist had discovered was that truth emerges not through forcing, but through surrendering to what is actually present. And in this way, The Buddha's teaching on non-attachment reveals something profound about the very nature of suffering. Most of our pain does not come directly from what happens to us, but from our resistance to what happened. It arises from our insistence that reality should be different than it is, from our attachment to outcomes that may or may not ever occur. When you can learn to want without grasping, to prefer without demanding, to hope without attaching, you begin to discover a kind of peace that does not depend on circumstances. This peace does not come from getting what you want. It comes from releasing the belief that you must have what you want in order to be okay. But what does this look like in the midst of real challenge? And it is important to understand that surrender does not mean passively accepting harmful situations or refusing to act when action is needed. True surrender often requires tremendous courage and clarity. Imagine you are facing a serious health challenge. Surrender does not mean refusing medical treatment or pretending that the illness does not exist. It means doing everything within your power to support your healing, while simultaneously releasing attachment to any particular outcome. It means fighting for your life without being at war with your circumstances. It means hoping for recovery, while also making peace with uncertainty. This kind of surrender requires a profound trust, not blind faith that everything will work out exactly as you wish, but a deeper trust in the intelligence of life itself. It is trusting that whatever arises, you have the capacity to meet it with presence and wisdom. It is trusting that even if events do not unfold according to your plans, there is a larger pattern at work, one that you may not yet be able to see from your current perspective. There is a well-known Zen story that beautifully illustrates this. A farmer's horse ran away, and his neighbors came to express their sympathy. "What terrible luck," they said. The farmer simply replied, "Maybe so, maybe not. We'll see." The next day the horse returned, bringing with it a herd of wild horses. The neighbors rushed back, this time to congratulate him. "What wonderful luck," they exclaimed. Again the farmer replied, "Maybe so, maybe not. We'll see." Soon after, the farmer's son tried to ride one of the wild horses and fell, breaking his leg. The neighbors returned once more to offer condolences. "What terrible luck," they said again, and again the farmer answered, "Maybe so, maybe not. We'll see." A week later, military officers arrived in the village to draft young men for war, but they passed over the farmer's son because of his broken leg. The neighbors, relieved, came again to celebrate the good fortune. And as always, the farmer simply said, "Maybe so, maybe not. We'll see." This story highlights the profound wisdom of non-attachment. The farmer was not indifferent to events. He surely had preferences regarding his horse, his son's health, and the threat of war. But he had learned to hold all outcomes lightly, recognizing that his limited perspective could never grasp the full picture of how events would ultimately unfold. This is the essence of surrender, not inaction, but an openness that allows life to reveal its deeper pattern. To live this way requires a fundamental shift in our understanding of control. Most of us are taught to believe that we are responsible for making things happen, for forcing outcomes, for controlling circumstances through sheer will and effort. Yet again and again, life reveals how limited that control tool is. What we actually can control is not the unfolding of events, but our response to them. We can control the quality of presence we bring to each moment. We can control whether we meet life with resistance or with acceptance, with fear or with love, with grasping or with openness. And paradoxically, when we redirect our energy toward what is truly within our control, life itself often begins to flow more smoothly. The Buddha's third noble truth points to something even deeper than releasing attachment to outcomes. It points to the recognition that the one who grasps, the ego that clings and demands, is itself a kind of illusion. When you investigate deeply into who or what is doing the grasping, You discover that there is no solid, separate entity there at all. There is only awareness, only consciousness, only the open space in which all experiences arise and pass away. And this awareness has never been attached to anything. It has never grasped, never demanded, never required reality to be other than it is. It simply observes. It simply receives. It simply allows everything to be exactly as it is in each moment. When you rest in this awareness, when you identify with the open space of consciousness rather than the ever-changing contents within it, you discover a peace that is utterly unshakable. This peace does not depend on pleasant circumstances. It does not require every problem to be solved or every desire to be fulfilled. It exists as the very nature of awareness itself, always available in any moment you remember to rest there. And yet, this recognition does not make you passive or indifferent. From this place of non-attachment, action becomes more skillful, not less. You can respond to situations with clarity rather than reactivity. You can make decisions grounded in wisdom rather than fear. You can engage with challenges from a place of centered presence rather than desperate grasping. There is a profound difference between giving up and letting go. Giving up carries the energy of defeat, resignation, and collapsed hope. Letting go, on the other hand, carries the energy of freedom, trust, and intelligent release. When you let go, you are not abandoning your dreams or desires. You are simply holding them more skillfully. Think of it as learning to hold a bird. If you grasp too tightly, you crush it. If you hold too loosely, it will fly away. But if you find the perfect balance, holding gently enough to provide safety, yet lightly enough to allow freedom, the bird may choose to stay, simply because it feels secure and appreciated. This is how surrender works with your dreams and goals. You hold them with gentle care, give them your attention and energy, but you do not grip so tightly that you suffocate their natural unfolding. Instead, you create conditions that support their manifestation while remaining unattached to whether they appear in exactly the way you imagine. The ancient Taoists called this Wu Wei, effortless action, or action that flows in harmony with the natural way of things. It is like water flowing around obstacles rather than trying to break through them. Water always finds the path of least resistance. Yet over time it can carve through the hardest stone. This is the power of surrender, not the brute power of force, but the subtle power of intelligent yield. When you align yourself with this deeper rhythm of life, you begin to sense when to act and when to wait, when to push forward and when to step back, when to speak and when to remain silent. You begin to embody what the Buddha described as right action. Action that arises from wisdom rather than compulsion, from clarity rather than confusion, and from love rather than fear. This kind of alignment requires learning to trust. For those of us who have spent years trying to control outcomes through effort and force, surrender can feel terrifying at first. The mind protests. If I don't make things happen, nothing will happen. If I don't control the outcome, everything will fall apart. But as you begin to experiment with surrender, starting with small, low-stakes situations, you often discover something surprising. Life reveals its own intelligence, its own timing, and its own ways of bringing things together in ways you could never have orchestrated. Opportunities arise that you couldn't have forced into being. Solutions appear that you couldn't have calculated or plan. Connections form that you could never have engineered. This doesn't mean you become passive or stop taking action. It means that your actions begin to flow from inspiration rather than desperation, from intuitive guidance rather than rigid calculation, and from presence rather than anxiety about the future. There is a story of a master gardener who was once asked about the secret to his success. He replied, "I don't force the plants to grow. I simply create the conditions that support their natural growth, and then I step aside." He explained that he waters them when they need water, gives them sunlight when they need light, protects them from harsh weather when necessary. But he does not try to make them grow faster than their natural rhythm, nor does he attempt to change their essential nature. He works with their inherent intelligence rather than against it. This is the art of surrender in daily life. You create the conditions that support what you want to flourish. You plant seeds through your actions, water them with your attention, and shine the light of your positive intention upon them. But then you trust the process. You trust the timing. You trust that life itself carries an intelligence about how things grow and unfold, and that this intelligence often exceeds the limited vision of your own plans. The Buddha's teaching on non-attachment doesn't ask you to stop caring about outcomes. Rather, it asks you to care about outcomes, while simultaneously caring about something even deeper, the quality of presence and love you bring to whatever is happening right now. When you can care fully while grasping lightly, when you can hope deeply while accepting completely, you discover a way of living that is both fully engaged and completely peaceful. As we near the end of our journey together, I want you to reflect on your own life. Where might you be grasping at water? Where are you forcing outcomes that might flow more naturally if you could ease your grip? Where are you holding on so tightly that what you long for most is slipping through your fingers? And then, with great gentleness, experiment with a different approach. Instead of clenching, try cupping your hands. Instead of holding with fear, hold with openness. See if you can carry your desires lightly, pursue your dreams with energy, but without attachment, and love people deeply while granting them the complete freedom to be themselves. This is not the practice of giving up or giving in. It is the practice of giving over, handing yourself to the deeper intelligence that moves through all of life. This is the same force that knows how to grow flowers from the soil, how to heal wounds with time, and how to draw hearts together across impossible distances. This is the art of receiving through surrender, the art of finding power through yielding, the art of discovering that what you thought was slipping away was actually always present. The water you feared to lose was never gone. It was simply waiting to serve in another form, always available, always ready to support the openness of your hands and the purposes of your heart. The Buddha's third noble truth promises that this kind of surrender leads to freedom, not the freedom of having no desires or preferences, but the freedom from the suffering that comes from demanding that reality conform to them. It is the freedom to want without grasping, to hope without clinging, to love without trying to possess. It is the peace that comes not from acquiring what you want, but from realizing that what you most deeply want, peace itself, was never dependent on external circumstances at all. Water teaches us this every day if we are willing to notice. Hold it gently, and it stays with you. Try to grasp it, and it slips away, yet it never truly leaves. It only finds another path, another form, another way to serve the endless circulation of life. And in that circulation, in that flow, in that constant dance between holding and releasing, we discover the rhythm that leads us home to the peace we have been seeking all along. The gentle return to your true frequency. As our journey together draws to a close, I want to leave you with one final image that brings everything into perfect focus. Imagine you hold a radio in your hands. Somewhere out there, in the vastness of space, your favorite station is already broadcasting. The music is already playing. The signal is already strong. The frequency is already there, complete and whole, waiting for you to find it. You don't need to create the station. You don't need to compose the music. You don't even need to generate the signal. You only need to tune your radio to the right frequency. And the moment you do, what was always present suddenly becomes available to your experience. This is exactly how peace, joy, and completeness work. They are not distant achievements to be earned through endless striving. They are not prizes to be won after proving yourself worthy. They are frequencies already broadcasting, already available, already here. The only task is to remember how to tune in. Throughout these hours together, we have been exploring the many ways we accidentally tune away from our true frequency. We saw how the fog of incompletion convinces us that something essential is missing. We examined how the moving finish line keeps us endlessly chasing, never arriving. We discovered how we can become like waves trying desperately to become water, forgetting that we already are water. We explored how reality is more like music than mathematics, and how the state of our inner being shapes the outer world we experience. We recognized the futility of waiting for silence before beginning our song, and discovered the deeper truth that we are the mountain we've been trying to climb all along. We learned that grasping water only makes it slip away, while gentle cupping allows it to rest peacefully in our hands. The Buddha understood this so clearly when he taught, "Peace comes from within, do not seek it without." He wasn't offering abstract philosophy or lofty advice. He was pointing directly to a simple, practical truth. Peace is not something found in external circumstances or future achievements. It is something you tune into, something you recognize, something you remember is always available no matter what's happening around you. The frequency of peace is broadcasting right now. The frequency of love is accessible in this very moment. The frequency of completeness, of wisdom, of joy, they are all here, already transmitting, simply waiting for you to adjust your inner dial and remember how to receive them. This doesn't mean you should ignore the practical realities of life or pretend that challenges don't exist. Rather, it means you meet those realities from the frequency of peace instead of the frequency of panic. You respond to challenges from the frequency of wisdom instead of reactivity. You approach relationships from the frequency of love instead of need. And here is the beautiful part of this understanding. The more you tune into these frequencies, the more natural it becomes. Like learning to ride a bicycle, what once required deliberate effort transforms into effortless presence. You no longer need to constantly remind yourself to be peaceful. Instead, you simply remember that peace is your natural frequency, and you return to it gently whenever you notice you've drifted away. The radio analogy reveals something profound about spiritual growth. You are not building something new from scratch or creating capacities that you never had before. You are simply remembering how to tune into what has always been available, how to access what has always been yours. This is why children often appear naturally peaceful before the world teaches them to tune into different, harsher frequencies. This is why moments of natural beauty can instantly reconnect us to awe and wonder. This is why deep rest can uncover a peace that feels both surprising and utterly familiar. We are not manufacturing these experiences. We are tuning into frequencies that never stopped broadcasting. As you continue your journey beyond our time together, remember that you always carry this inner radio with you. In moments of stress, you can pause and ask, what frequency am I tuned into right now? In times of conflict, you can choose to tune into the frequency of understanding instead of being right. In periods of uncertainty, you can attune yourself to the frequency of trust instead of fear. And remember, the tuning process is always gentle. You do not force the dial or wrench it violently from one station to another. You turn it slowly, carefully, listening for the signal to become clearer, for the static to fade away. And then suddenly the music emerges, not because you created it, but because you found the frequency where it was always playing. Before we part ways, I want to acknowledge something truly beautiful that has unfolded during our time together. Right now, people from all around the world have been listening to these words. tuning into the same frequency of possibility and peace. Whether you are in your bedroom at midnight, walking through a quiet park, or sitting in your car during a short break, you have been part of a global community remembering their way home to themselves. Every time you choose peace over panic, love over fear, presence over distraction, you are contributing to a collective tuning that makes it easier for others to find these frequencies too. Your commitment to remembering who you truly are is not just personal, it is a gift. It ripples outward to everyone whose life you touch. And so, as we close, I want to express my deepest gratitude. Gratitude for your willingness to take this journey. Gratitude for your openness to exploring these ideas. Gratitude for your courage to even consider that you might already be everything you've been seeking. The station is always broadcasting your true frequency, the frequency of peace, love, wisdom, and completeness never goes off the air. Sometimes you will find yourself tuned into other stations, caught up in the static of worry or the noise of endless seeking. This is completely natural, entirely human, and nothing to resist or judge. It is simply part of the experience of living. And when you notice you have drifted away, all that is required is to reach for the dial with gentleness and compassion. Turn slowly, patiently, toward the frequency that feels most like home. Listen carefully for the signal that reminds you of who you truly are, beneath all the stories, beneath all the striving, beneath the apparent complexity of human life. The Buddha's words still echo across more than 2,500 years. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. These words are not distant philosophy, but a living reminder. They mean that no matter what is happening in your external world, whether chaos, challenge, or uncertainty, you always have access to the frequency of peace, love, and wisdom. This access does not come as something to be earned through struggle, but as something to be remembered, something you can tune into. At any moment you recall that the radio is, and always has been, in your hand. So rest now, if rest feels right. Allow these frequencies to accompany you into your day, into your relationships, and into whatever joys or challenges await you. Carry them like a gentle song playing quietly in the background, guiding your steps and softening your presence. Remember always that you are both the radio and the music, both the receiver and the signal, both the seeker and the very thing you have been seeking all along. Thank you for this sacred time we have shared together. Thank you for your openness, your listening, and your beautiful willingness to remember. The frequency of your true nature is always broadcasting, steady and unwavering. It never fades, it never stops. It is always here, waiting for you to notice.
Welcome home to yourself. Welcome home to the peace that was never absent. Not for a single moment.
The song continues, and you are both its listener and its voice, forever tuned to the eternal frequency of wholeness.